The segment includes news regarding preparations for Sunday's elections in Russia. Now, 2 Senate subcommittees hold a hearing on video game violence and its impact on kids. Senators Joseph Lieberman and Herbert Kohl chair the proceedings. The 2 are co-sponsors of a bill that would require video game manufacturers to label their products to reveal their violence and sexual content. We'll hear more about the legislation shortly and hear from representatives of Nintendo and Sega. And we'd like to tell you ahead of time that the committee will be viewing some video games from which have been judged to have violent content. We'll hear first from Senator Kohl.
This hearing is called to order. This hearing is a joint hearing of Senator Lieberman's Governmental Affairs Subcommittee on Government Regulation and Information and my Judiciary Subcommittees on Juvenile Justice. Our subcommittees have jurisdiction over most children's issues and federal commissions. Before I turn the microphone over to Senator Lieberman for his opening statement, I want to make one point. Today is the first day of Hanukkah, and we have already begun the Christmas season. It is a time that we think about peace on earth and goodwill towards all people, and also about giving gifts to our friends and our loved ones. But it is also a time when we need to take a close, hard look at just what it is that we are actually buying for our kids. And that is why we are holding this hearing on violent video games at this time. That is why we intend to introduce legislation on violent video games as soon as Congress returns. Senator Lieberman.
Thank you very much, Senator Kohl. It's a privilege to co-chair this joint hearing with you. As chairman of the Judiciary Subcommittee on Juvenile Justice, you've been out front in protecting our children and frankly, and occasionally protecting the rest of us from our children, from minors, particularly in terms of their ability to obtain guns. An amendment on the crime bill, which I was privileged to co-sponsor with. Thank you for your leadership on that. Every day, the news brings more and more images of random violence, torture, and sexual aggression right into our living rooms. Just this week, the dreadful story of the young girl abducted from a slumber party in her own home and then found killed. A man on a commuter train begins coldly and methodically to fire away at innocents on their way home, killing 5 people and injuring many others. Violence and violent images permeate more and more aspects of our lives, and I think it's time to draw the line. I know that one place parents want us to draw the line is with violence in video games. The fact is that a new generation of video games crosses that line, containing the most horrible depictions of graphic violence and sex, including particularly violence against women. Like the Grinch who stole Christmas, these violent video games threaten to rob this particular holiday season of a spirit of goodwill. Instead of enriching a child's mind, these games teach a child to enjoy inflicting torture. For those who have not seen these so-called games before, I want to show you what we're talking about. What you're about to see are scenes from 2 of the most violent new video games. First, we have Mortal Kombat, which is a martial arts contest involving digitized characters. We're going to show 2 versions of the game. In the first segment, which is Sega's version, blood splatters from the contestants' heads. When a player wins, the so-called death sequence begins. The game narrator instructs the player to finish, and I quote, finish his opponent. The player may then choose a method of murder, ranging from ripping a heart out to pulling off the head of the opponent with spinal cord attached. The second version, made by Nintendo, leaves out the blood and decapitation, but as you will see, it is still a violent game. Should we come back to it later, Kathy? I presume that the kids who are playing these games have more success than we this morning at showing them. The second game is Night Trap, which is a game set in a sorority house. The object is to keep hooded men from hanging the young woman from a hook or drilling their necks with a tool designed to drain their blood. Night Trap uses actual actors and achieves an unprecedented level of realism. What is particularly troubling about the scene in this film that we have an extract of is a graphic depiction of the violence against women with strong overtones of sexual violence. I find this segment deeply offensive and believe that it simply should be taken off the market. Now, these games are just the beginning. These two we've talked about. Every day, new games are appearing on the market. Last Wednesday, in fact, as we were announcing our intention to introduce legislation to create a rating system for video games and to hold this hearing, one video game maker was announcing the release of yet another brutal video game, which is called Lethal Enforcers. This game encourages players to shoot this gun, which is called a justifier. In other words, this is the handheld implement with which you play the game by shooting it at the screen, and the more successful you are, the more powerful the gun becomes. CD technology is also making sexually explicit video games available, and there's no way really of effectively keeping these games out of the hands of kids. Next on the horizon are interactive video games, which are going to come right through our TV screens over cable channels. Now, today, just a short while ago, I gather that some members of the video game industry announced their intention to create a voluntary rating or a warning label system. Are we ready? You want to go with it? Okay. I am pleased that the video game business, by this action, has shown that it recognizes that there's a problem here. A credible rating system will help parents determine which games are appropriate for children of different ages, and that is exactly what our proposed legislation contemplates. But I must say here that creating a rating system is, in my opinion, the very least the video game industry can do, not the best they can do. It would be far better for America's parents and children if the industry simply kept the worst violence and sex out of their games. Now, I have three major concerns as the industry develops a rating system. First, there are questions about the system itself. Who will do the rating? Will all manufacturers participate? How many age-specific ratings will there be? Will the industry spend money to inform parents about the meanings of the ratings? Second, a rating system must not be perverted into a cynical marketing ploy to attract children to more violent games. A rating system without some industry self-regulation may put us just where we don't want to be. We must not allow the industry to trumpet a violent rating as a selling point. Third, the industry must work to enforce whatever rating system it creates. It should consider licensing agreements and contracts which specify that ratings will be clearly visible in any advertising and understandable by parents and consumers. Distributors, including video rental stores or toy stores, should face some kind of incentives or, in fact, penalties from manufacturers if they sell or rent to children below the minimum ages in the ratings. Because of these concerns, Senator Cole and I are certainly going to proceed with our legislative proposal. Since we believe that our announcing the intention to introduce this bill has helped us get this far, going forward with the legislation is the best insurance that we get as far as we can in resolving this problem. Now, let me stress that a rating system will only be as strong as the weakest link in the distribution system, from manufacturer to advertiser to retailer. And the industry, I think, must make sure that all those links are strong. I want to note here for the record that we contacted several of the biggest toy stores, Toys R Us and KB among others, I believe Walmart also, to invite them to join us today, but they failed to respond, and I'm disappointed by that decision. They too have a responsibility to cooperate in creating a credible system to keep adult games out of the hands of children. Without their cooperation, no rating or warning label system can work. Even if all of these concerns with a rating system are addressed, the video game industry, in my opinion, will not have done as much as it should do to avoid creating more violence in our already too violent society. The rating system must not be a fig leaf for the industry to hide behind. They must also accept their responsibility to control themselves and simply stop producing the worst of this junk. Now, the industry is blessed with some of the most exciting technology existing today. Millions are being spent to gain the interest of our children in that technology. But when they gain that interest, I think the industry also accepts a responsibility. As Bob Keeshan, who was Captain Kangaroo, said last week, the industry has a responsibility to nurture healthy children and a healthy society, or at least, I would add, not to undermine the attempts by parents to nurture healthy children. The video game industry has not lived up to its responsibility to America's parents and children. I hope they will do so in the coming months, at the least by developing a credible and enforceable rating system, and at best by taking the worst games or the worst parts of those games off the market. Bob Keeshan made another excellent point last week when he said that children don't need violence to be entertained. His show proved that for over 30 years. As a father of a 5-year-old, I couldn't agree more, but I'm not naive. I know that all the public outcry and congressional interest may not stop the flood of violent video games. For this reason, we need to make sure that parents have the information they need to establish a healthy environment for their kids, and that parents use their power as consumers to convince the video industry to regulate itself. If the violence and sex doesn't come out of the games, parents should be able to keep the games out of their homes. Thank you, Senator Cole.
Thank you very much, Senator Lieberman. I'd like to begin by commending you for your leadership in this area. As you know, Senator Lieberman, I have some familiarity with your subcommittee. So when I say that you're doing a great job, I do so from personal experience. I'd like to briefly outline the major issues as I see them. First, with today's announcement that most of the video game industry is committed to a rating system, I believe that we've already changed the terms of the debate. Simply put, we are no longer asking whether violent video games may cause harm to our children, especially to our young children. Clearly they can, or the industry would not be willing to rate its own games so that young kids cannot obtain them. The question now is just what restrictions we need to put in place and who should do it. Not surprisingly, the video game industry believes that self-regulation is best. And in the best of all possible worlds, I would agree. Government intervention should be a last rather than a first resort. In a sense, then, this hearing represents a window of opportunity for the video game industry. Under one scenario, the industry can throw us the smallest possible bone and gamble that it can take the wind out of our legislative sails. In my estimation, that would not only be a bad risk, but also an irresponsible position. Under another scenario, the industry can do something more substantial, at the very least creating an independent panel to review the suitability of these games for children with the purpose of eliminating the most violent games. It is up to the industry then whether they can be heroes or Grinches. I spent the bulk of my adult life in business, and I know that if Nintendo and Sega, which together control 90% of the market, make the development and enforcement of a meaningful rating system a top priority, then it will happen, quickly, voluntarily, and without chilling any First Amendment rights. Second, let me say that I share Senator Lieberman's outrage at the excerpts that we will be viewing on the TV. Mortal Kombat and Night Trap are not the kind of gifts that responsible parents give. Night Trap, which adds a new dimension of violence specifically targeted against women, is especially repugnant. It ought to be taken off the market entirely, or at the very least, its most objectionable scenes should be removed. But those games are only two examples. Let me tell you about another video game called Lethal Enforcers. It comes with a special piece of hardware, an oversized handgun called the Justifier. And what does this game seem to teach our kids? Basically, that a gun can solve any problem. With Lethal Enforcers, sometimes the player hits innocent bystanders. In that case, blood splatters to the ground. But what the heck? Bystanders need to learn to get out of the way. Make no mistake about it, Lethal Enforcers is aimed at young kids. Just look at the ad. The warning label is almost entirely obscured, but enormous guns dominate the package. The ad features more than 20 guns in all, and the lead of the ad says, "You won't find a toy like this in any Cracker Jack box." Well, I hope not. What a cynical, irresponsible way to market a product. I find this glorification of kids and guns to be highly offensive. It comes on the heels of our long battle to enact the Brady Bill, and less than a month after Senator Lieberman and I passed a bill to take handguns away from minors. At the very least, this game sends a tremendously reckless message and turns any effort to discourage youth violence completely on its head. Third, we all know that there are many causes of the violence that plagues our cities and increasingly our suburbs and our small towns. Broken families, poor education, easy access to firearms, drugs, the list goes on. And certainly violent video games and TV violence have become a significant part. But we cannot become paralyzed by the multiplicity of causes or the magnitude of the challenge. We need to make every effort to reduce this culture of carnage, and we need to make that effort now, because with interactive technology and virtual reality, these games are going to become even more sophisticated and persuasive. Experts can debate whether entertainment violence causes brutality in society or merely reflects it, but there should be no dispute that the pervasive images of murder, mutilation, and mayhem encourages our kids to view violent activity as a normal part of life, and that interactive video violence desensitizes children to the real thing. Our nation's children should not be told that to be a winner, you need to be a killer, or that make-believe violence yields real-life success. That subtle but menacing message pollutes our society. If the video game industry cannot effectively police itself, and so far, despite today's announcement, it has not proven that it can, then parents throughout the country will insist that Congress take action. Because while adults can rely on the dictates of the marketplace, obviously our children cannot. So today we're here to learn more about this issue and seek advice and cooperation from all sides. We hope to produce substantive results, and as part of that effort, we hope that we will receive a pledge from the industry to make a real commitment to our kids that exceeds its commitment to the bottom line. We have with us today one of our esteemed colleagues, that's Senator Dorgan. We'd like to call upon him.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I'm only going to be able to be at this hearing for an hour, but I'm on
Senator Lieberman's subcommittee, and I wanted very much to be here because I think this is a very important issue. It has been quite a leap from Pac-Man to Night Trap. Video games and its impact and effect on our children is an important issue, and in many respects it's a first cousin to the issue of violence on television programming. One of my interests is legislation I've introduced with respect to violence on television, but this is, in my judgment, related to that. Children spend not only a lot of time in front of television sets, but many children spend a lot of time in front of video games, playing video games. I know we have people who are critics of the bill that you have introduced jointly and critics of those of us who are concerned about violence on television. These critics are similar, in my judgment, to those who are standing around still counseling us that there's no evidence cigarettes cause cancer. There's no evidence, they say, that violence on television or violence in video games affects our children. Of course it affects our children. If we lost all common sense, of course it affects our children. And it affects our kids in a very negative way. About 2 months ago, I saw the video game Night Trap for the first time. It is a sick, disgusting video game, in my judgment. It's an effort to trap and kill women. Shame on people that produce that trash. It's child abuse, in my judgment. And I know there'll be people who say, well, we sit up here as the thought police, trying to suggest what people can see or do. It's not my intention. We have some basic responsibility in this country to protect children. Those of us that have children understand that they deserve protection. Certain things are appropriate for them and certain things are not appropriate. And when we see the new generation of video games, and especially Night Trap and several other examples, in my judgment, they've gone too far. So I want to compliment the two of you on the legislation you've introduced. I think that it's a breath of fresh air. I want to add my name as co-sponsor and join you in your efforts. Someone said, I don't remember the author, that 100 years from now it won't really matter very much how much your income was or how big your house was. But the world might be a different place because you were important in the life of a child. Maybe, just maybe, this hearing, maybe, just maybe, your efforts will be important in the lives of children and will make improvements in this world. I hope so, and I'm pleased to be a part of this hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Dorgan. We'd like to call our first panel right now. The panel is composed of representatives from academia, education, and also concerned citizens. If you'd like to come up, we'll announce you. Dr. Parker Page is the president of the Children's Television Resource and Education Center. Dr. Page has been a leader on the issue of violence in the media with regard to its effects on children and has addressed the issue of video game violence. Dr. Eugene Provanzo is a professor of education at the University of Miami and author of the book Video Kids, Making Sense of Nintendo. Dr. Robert Chase from Danbury, Connecticut is Vice President of the National Education Association and speaks on behalf of millions of educators throughout our country. And last but certainly not least, Ms. Marilyn Droz is the Vice President of the National Coalition on Television Violence. She is here in that capacity and as the mother of a teenager. Before we introduce our panelists any further, we'd like to watch the video. Senator Lieberman.
Thank you, Senator Cole. Well, the tapes are ready, which I described before. They begin with the two sequences from Mortal Kombat. The first is the Sega version. The second, regrettably, is a very brief, but nonetheless illustrative sequence from the Nintendo version. Go ahead. For a lot of you to see, but there's blood splattering every time.
Kato wins. Flawless victor fatality. Fight. Excellent. Finish him.
This is a brief sequence from the Nintendo version. Now, the difference there, as you can see, is that that version does not have the finishing sequences, the death sequences, and in fact, instead of red blood spurting out, there's some other liquid, but it doesn't look like blood. Now we'll go to the night trap sequence.
Megan, this isn't gonna work. You're not scaring me. Wait. What are you doing now? Megan,
That's all there is.
All right, let's continue. We'd like to thank you all for being here today. In order that we can move the hearing on with reasonable quickness, we'd like to ask you to hold yourself to a 5-minute opening statement and to be pretty careful about maintaining that schedule. We'll include your full statement in the record. And when you've finished your opening statements, then myself and Senator Lieberman, Senator Dorgan would like to ask you a few questions. Dr. Page, we'd like to start with you first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since the inception in 1984, the Children's Television Resource and Education Center has been dedicated to creating research-based products and services that promote children's social development and academic success. During this period, TV violence has been one of our chief concerns. That concern has been supported by 2 comprehensive government reports and more than 3,000 studies on the effects of television. While TV violence remains a significant problem, parents and educators tell us that they are increasingly worried about the effects of violent video games on children. But do their worries merit national attention? After all, in a country which is grappling with an epidemic of real-life violence, should we bother ourselves with kids' leisure time activities like video game playing? We think the answer is yes. For while the impact of violent video games is still open to debate, early studies as well as decades of television research warn us of possible consequences, especially for young children. The TV research is conclusive. Violent screen images have their own special effects. Children who watch a steady diet of violent programming increase their chances of becoming more aggressive towards other children, less cooperative and altruistic, more tolerant of real-life violence, and more afraid of the world outside their homes. The case against video game violence is not nearly so clear-cut, for one simple reason: there hasn't been enough research. In the last 10 years, only a handful of published reports have explored the effects of video games. Moreover, the few experimental studies that have been conducted relied on crude, cartoon-like video games produced in the early 80s, archaic by today's standards of technological wizardry. Even so, several of the initial video game studies suggest that there is a link, much like television's, between the violent video games and children's aggression. For example, research studies have found that 1, At least in the short term, children who play violent video games are significantly more aggressive afterwards than those children who play less violent video games. 2, violent TV programs and video games have similar effects in raising children's subsequent levels of aggression. And 3, violent video games can suppress children's inclination towards engaging in pro-social behaviors. All this research is limited and it's dated. The overall trends, however, must give us cause for concern as we approach virtual reality in video game technology. Mortal Kombat is simply the first in a new generation of video games that allow software designers to combine high levels of violence with fully digitalized human beings. While these lifelike characters may make the video game more thrilling, the previous TV research sends us a warning. The more realistic the images of violence, the more likely they are to influence young children's attitudes and behaviors. Unfortunately, there is no timeout for millions of American children who are daily immersed in video game violence and bombarded by video game advertising. Clearly, all of us, government, the industry, parents, need to create our own action on this side of the video screen. The actions we recommend are as follows. We recommend that the federal government fund independent research projects and disseminate their findings in order to shed additional light on the effects of video games and other emerging interactive media. We recommend that the video game industry, 1, provide parents with more accurate and detailed product information than is presently available, and, I'm happy to hear today, establish an industry-wide rating system that's independent of producer pressures. 2, make an industry-wide commitment to advertising strategies and marketing tie-ins that reinforce such a rating system rather than undercut it. 3, pursue a voluntary industry-wide agreement to put a cap on the violence. With the emergence of enhanced human-like graphics, video games that allow young players to participate in heinous acts of cruelty, misogyny, and inhumanity should not be portrayed regardless of profits. Having made these recommendations, it's important to underscore the fact that parents, not government or industry, must still shoulder the major responsibility for guiding their children's entertainment activities. We recommend strongly that parents, 1, become actively involved in helping their children make video game choices that reflect each family's own values. 2, take seriously the video game rating labels, warnings, or content descriptions that are available. And 3, make video game playing truly interactive by setting up time limits, substituting less violent games, and by making game playing a social rather than isolating activity. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, I believe that this national attention on video game violence affords us a rare opportunity. Unlike the enormous time lag between the TV violence research findings and public awareness, we now have a chance to help lower the impact of video game violence on children's lives sooner rather than later. I hope that all of us, government, parents, researchers, and the video game industry will seize the moment. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Page. Dr. Provanzo.
Most adults pay relatively little attention to video games since they're largely the domain of childhood. Although I've been studying toys, games, and the culture of childhood for nearly 20 years, it wasn't until a neighbor came up to me about 3 years ago and asked me what I thought of video games that I began to consider the implications of the games. What I discovered I eventually described in my book, Video Kids Making Sense of Nintendo. And what I found shocked me. Video games are overwhelmingly violent, sexist, and racist. Some of my more recent research, which I'd like to share with you today, suggests that video games are evolving into a new type of interactive medium. Participatory or interactive television is what I'm calling it. Possibly something very close to what Aldous Huxley described in Brave New World as the Feelies. This new CD-ROM-based video game technology represents a major evolutionary step beyond the simple classics, simple graphics of the classic Space Invader arcade games so popular 15 or 20 years ago, or even the tiny animated cartoon figures that we see in the Nintendo system. When you combine this technology the CD-ROM-based technology, which allows you to have these digitized films in the computer. When you combine those with virtual reality technologies like Sega's Activator, which literally allows you to have your movements sensed, punching, hitting, kicking, all translated into the computer, we have something which is a remarkably different and new type of thing. What I want to do in the next few minutes is just make it very clear that we are dealing with something different, a new type of television. I have references in my statement to the extensive studies that have been done on video and television violence, and you can refer to those. As a researcher, I'm absolutely convinced by what's coming out that the long-term effects of television on increasing aggressiveness in children and its carryover into adult life is very, very clearly there. I can cite studies by Joy et al., Hussman, where television's been introduced for the first time into communities that no longer had television. For example, in Canada, where this was done, a small isolated community that didn't get a television signal in. What they found, and I won't go into the technical parts of it, but essentially aggressiveness in children increased by 160% after they were exposed to television. Similar types of studies by Hussman. And I'll just summarize, I'll give you the summary statement from some research done by Brandon Centerwall of the University of Washington. He's in the Department of Epidemiology and Psychiatry. And he took an epidemiological look at television and video violence and looked at comparative studies between Canada, the United States, and South Africa, which did not have television until 1975. Centerwall concludes from his research that in the United States and Canada, the introduction of television in the 1950s caused a subsequent doubling of the homicide rate, i.e. long-term childhood exposure to television is a causal factor behind approximately 1/2 of the homicides committed in the United States, or approximately 10,000 homicides annually. He goes on to conclude that while other factors such as poverty, crime, alcohol, drug abuse, and stress certainly contribute to violence, the epidemiological evidence suggests that, quote, if hypothetically television technology had never been developed, there would be 10,000 fewer homicides each year in the United States, 70,000 fewer rapes, and 700,000 fewer injury assaults. Now, what I'm positing here is that there is a relationship between television violence and the studies there that should be understood in terms of the new emerging interactive television that these video games represent. Don't think of these strictly as video games anymore. Think of this as a new type of television that is going to emerge into the 90s. The likely relationship between violence and television is very important in this context of interactive video games for children. For you see, the real significance of video game technology for contemporary childhood is that it represents the first stages in the creation of a new type of television, an interactive medium as different from traditional television as television is from radio. I believe that the remaining years of this decade will see the emergence and definition of this new media form in the same way that the late 1940s and early 1950s saw television emerge as a powerful social and cultural force. Now, if the video game industry is going to provide the foundation for the development of interactive television, then concerned citizens, parents, educators, legislators have cause for considerable concern and alarm. During the past decade, the video game industry has developed games whose social content has been overwhelmingly violent, sexist, and racist, issues that I've addressed extensively in my research. For example, in Video Kids, I explored the 47 most popular video games in America. What I found out was that violence was the main theme. Of the 47 most popular video games, this is based on Nintendo Power polls, industry polls, 40 had violence as their main theme. Of these 47 games, 13 included scenarios in which women were kidnapped and had to be rescued, i.e. the idea of women as victims. This represents a total of 30% of the games, a number which is even more revealing when we take into account that 11 of the 47 games were based on sports themes such as car racing or basketball. Women were consistently rescued by men in these scenarios, and there's a gender issue operating obviously there, gender bias. And although men were often rescued in the games too, they were never rescued by women. My point is that video games such as Nintendo have a marked tradition of extreme violence, which is also combined with significant gender discrimination. Now, you've had a chance to see these types of games, and Am I out of my time? Okay. Let me just summarize quickly then.
Yes, go ahead.
Please go ahead.
Finish up.
Okay. What it comes down to is that in my testimony, I simply established the fact that the major game industry people are not taking into account their responsibility in this area and that they have a real obligation to do so. And I'd like to conclude by saying that essentially we are at the threshold of a new generation of interactive video gaming and television. Well, I believe that this technology has wonderful potential. As an educator, I'm terrifically excited about this type of material or this technology. I think we can do extraordinary things with it. I'm also convinced that if we continue using it without realizing and addressing the full ramifications and significance of the social content of video games, then we'll be doing ourselves a serious disservice to both our children and our culture.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Mr. Chase.
Senator Cole, Senator Lieberman, Senator Dorgan. I am Bob Chase, Vice President of the National Education Association, which represents 2.1 million education employees in the nation's public elementary, secondary, vocational, and post-secondary schools. And I do appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about this very serious problem, the problem of the proliferation of corrupting influences on our children today. America's children are faced with a bewildering set of messages from television, movies, music, electronic games, and the print media. Too often, the most unrelenting assault on the senses, encouraging aggression and irresponsibility, are in direct opposition to the values families hope to instill and the mores our society struggles to preserve. Parents, social scientists, and the community at large share deep trepidation about the fruits of this ever-widening dispersal of negative images. The explosion of media in the latter half of this century has made the problem all the more pervasive and the challenges for parents and community leaders all the more difficult. It's not surprising that the first response is to suppress books, movies, or other media that are offensive on the basis of their sexual, violent, racist, or sexist content. Many Americans, in fact, believe we can no longer permit the unfettered production and distribution of media that is contrary to commonly accepted standards of decency. And yet, as history has proven, there will never be a true consensus for a national standard of decency. More importantly, we cannot afford to try to protect our nation by undermining one of the United States' most essential foundation stones, the First Amendment. The NEA has long been a fierce advocate of First Amendment rights. The First Amendment is central to a tradition of academic freedom and free inquiry that is the hallmark of American public education. It is in fact vital to our democracy, and it is essential to the livelihood of our members as educators and America's students as thinkers and communicators. Some may argue that our founding generation never anticipated the denigration of women on television in programs and advertisements when they averred that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. It is reasonable to argue that they never contemplated the need for restrictions on electronic games with intensely violent or graphically sexual content, nor could they, in their wildest imagination, conceive of microchip circuitry, CD-ROM technology, or the leisure time to expend on such idleness. It remains to this generation to sort it out. It is unfortunate that the producers of such electronic games do not exercise restraint. And I join Senator Lieberman in calling for the producers of such electronic games to live up to their responsibility in helping raise a generation of children free from violence. It is even certainly disheartening that there is a demand for games that are explicitly violent and graphically sexual. The first line of defense against wide distribution of such games and other material remains the family. All parents must assume for themselves the responsibility to raise their children with a set of values, standards of respect and decency, and a sense of limits about what is appropriate behavior in our society. The real challenge comes when we begin to determine what our community standards are. My own independence, the legacy and heritage of the American characters, determines that I don't wish anyone, even members of this committee or any other body, to dictate to me what I believe to be appropriate for my daughters to see, or to say, or to do, any more than I would presume to tell you what is appropriate for your sons and daughters. What is fitting, however, and I hope we can share, is a commitment to providing parents with appropriate tools to make reasonable judgments for our children. That is precisely what we are here to consider today. The facts in this matter, I believe, are not in dispute. There is a relationship between thought and action. Media that contain violence and inappropriate sexual behavior and bigotry can promote these behaviors in others. Electronic games, because they are active rather than passive, can do more than desensitize impressionable children to violence. They actually encourage violence as the resolution of first resort by rewarding participants for killing one's opponents in the most grisly ways imaginable. Many movies, books, television programs, performances in electronic games are inappropriate for young audiences, and we must assure that the guidelines that now exist for films to serve as a tool for parents be extended to the electronic games. NEA strongly supports the legislation authored by Senator Lieberman and co-sponsored by Senator Cole to establish a national independent council for entertainment and video devices. We believe this council, working with the video game industry, can and must establish a system for parental notification about graphic, sexual, or violent materials contained in some video games. In addition to providing parents a tool for identifying games that are inappropriate for children, we believe the Council can help promote awareness of the relationship between the depictions of violence and the reality of violence in America today. America's public schools and the members of the National Education Association have long played a vital role in preserving our culture. And in recent years, we have worked to establish programs to help our members and schools address the issues of violence in our society. A September edition of Teacher TV, which airs on the Learning Channel, focused on issues of violence and violence prevention in the classroom. This episode has become the most requested of the 30 programs we have produced because of the sincere and grievous problems that our educators are having around this country. We ask all Americans to join us in supporting those lessons learned in schools, to help teachers teach our young people about positive ways of dealing with conflict, and to take steps to learn and wisely choose among entertainment options for their own children. Thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you today.
Thank you, Ms. Chase. Ms. Droz.
Thank you for the honor of being able to address you gentlemen today. I'm Marilyn Droz. I'm from Farmington Hills, Michigan. I've been a parent for 16 years, a wife for 20, a teacher in Royal Oak, Michigan for 23, and a woman since the day I was born. And let me tell you, on all three, all my labels and all the hats I wear, I find that so extremely offensive, and the only word you can say to the manufacturers and the shareholders of the company is shame on you. And I think that they really should stop and think about what they're doing. I mean, how would you like to have a teenage daughter go out on a date with someone who's just watched or played 3 hours of that game? The word toy comes from the Scandinavian word little tools. And it's very appropriate because every play is the work of children. And play and their toys, it's what prepares children for the future. The toys that we have now, the technology that we are getting through the video games is phenomenal. And certainly it's can have the power to prepare our children for a future that we are not even able to understand ourselves, and a future that's well worth looking forward to, if we can get the industry to change some of the values and some of the levels of violence that are in the games. Children, when computers first came out, computers and video games were played equally among boys and girls in the classroom. There was equal time. Now there's a turn around where it seems more boys, of course, are comfortable with the technology. Video games are geared for boys. We are losing 50% of our children are losing the value of learning from the interaction techniques and technology. we are now losing another generation of women if we don't start addressing that the video games must address the needs of all children, and the need, of course, being a safe toy. The girls do want, we're doing some research at NCTV which is indicating the girls are very offended by the lack of games for them to play with. They feel inferior. The boys and girls are very easy to determine which are girl games, boy games. Girl games are the ones with the fluffy little bunnies. And they're the games the boys choose not to play with. Playing video games has become a macho boy thing. Girls are being trained in dressing Barbie dolls, and boys are being trained in technology. This has to change. As a mother, as a parent, as a woman, and as an American citizen, I'm stating this needs to be changed. The video industry has done the same thing that the movie industry has done. They have confused children's desire for action with violence. My 23 years of working with children directly have proven to me that children want action, they want excitement. They do not need to see the insides of people splattered against the wall to understand that, they need action, but they do not need to find murder as a form of entertainment. Teachers by day, parents by nights, we all work so hard to raise our children to learn proper problem solving and to raise them to be good American citizens. And all our actions are undermined by the moment they go to the video game and they learn that the only way to solve a problem, the quickest, most efficient way to solve a problem is kill them off. And this has to stop. There are very few women characters of any control or power. The self-image that we are giving our girls through the video games is showing them that they are, once again, sex objects and victims. They have their choice. The very few women who are of any kind of power are built with iron body parts, or they have the kiss of death. Once again, they can blow the kiss of death. Once again, we got sex and violence mixed in the message. This has to stop. Cigarettes, cars, almost everything we purchase nowadays has regulations. Certainly, if we have regulations saying that toys have to be physically safe for children, no one can swallow. The only law protecting our children now is that no moving parts in this video game can be swallowed by someone under the age of 3. Well, I'm finding this violence very difficult to swallow. I see my light, and I want to thank you, gentlemen, so much for bringing this issue to the public. You need to be applauded. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rose. I'd like to ask each of you, if you had the opportunity to talk to the manufacturers who will be sitting here after you leave the witness table, what would you say to them? I'll start with you, Dr. Page.
Well, I have, I guess, two issues. The first is that I really would like to see the marketing techniques now that this proposed rating system is going into effect. Marketing techniques so that they are not toy and candy tie-ins for games that are designed for kids 13, 14, and 15 years old, but the toy tie-ins will attract children 4, 5, and 6 years old. I think it puts tremendous pressure on parents to buy games that are marketed in that way. Secondly, I think what I would like to see, and I echo what Ms. Droz said, I think what kids are attracted to, especially younger children, is action. And I would hope that the industry, with all of the great minds that they have and the creative minds that they have, would put more time and effort into finding creative games that supply action and movement and the glitz that kids love, and at least drop back a little bit, and probably more than a little bit, on the violence that seems to be the mainstay of most of the games at this point.
Dr. Provenzo?
I think there are a couple of things. One is that a lot of people in the industry say that these things simply reflect what's in the culture. I think that by manufacturing games like Night Trap, what in point of fact these manufacturers are doing are endorsing that violence. And I think that's really objectionable. I think that there is an obligation, as Mr. Page has said, to develop good games. And I think to stop confusing violence with entertainment, and to really put the time and effort into developing quality games, which is much harder to do. One of the things about the games is they have remarkably similar scenarios. The game industry is, in point of fact, not developing new games. What they're doing is they're cloning them from one another. There needs to be a major effort to develop quality games, and there are a whole series of scenarios we know from game and toy history in order to do that. Another thing is that parents need to be provided with guidelines, help in choosing games. Those need to be available in toy stores, in video rental places. In addition, the industry needs to reveal what the games actually are on the covers. They are very, very clever at not giving you a full notion of what the game is about in terms of how they're advertised on the covers and when you walk into the store. It's very different when you see them in the advertising. The kids know what they're about, but the parents really don't know what they're about. So those would be my major suggestions.
All right. Mr. Chase. What would you say to him if you had a chance?
I think it would be a very simple message, and that's responsibility. I understand only too well the importance of the profit motive in business and applaud that and appreciate that. However, I think that there are some things that override that. And the continued opportunity for young people to engage in violent activity, and that's what this interactive games do give young people the opportunity to do, in fact, is an irresponsible act. And it is very harmful in a situation where our society is trying very, very hard to overcome the increasing amount of violence in this country. Just as a teacher and a teacher leader, I have the responsibility to educate young people in the best way possible. I think business leaders who produce games and toys or whatever for children have the responsibility to ensure that those games and toys enhance our society rather than tear it asunder.
Very good. Ms. Rose?
I would ask them to work together with a panel of people outside of the industry like you gentlemen have suggested. I feel to allow themselves to police themselves when they've already demonstrated they are out of control is like leaving a classroom in charge with the troublemaker. You know, that's not responsible. I feel that they need to have more input from people in the field, like some of the gentlemen I'm serving on the panel with. I would like them to set up a rating system that is more accurate rather than the pass-fail system, really, that they have now. Either it's violent, you know, they just seem to have like basically two categories of games, and it's a pass-fail. I would like to see a rating system that allows parents to truly judge the program. It is easier for a mom to understand the ingredients in a Hostess cupcake than it is to understand what's inside that video game box. And I'd like to reverse, you know, get some truth in labeling and some more games, and I like them to work closely with the educational community. They've been excellent at teaching children that violence is a problem-solving technique. Now I'd like them to teach children creativity, logic, and other forms of problem-solving. They can do it better than anybody.
Make a comment in that context. This is an industry that, as I understand, in 1992 made $5.1 billion. I'd like to look at them and say, you are profiting off of the American child to an enormous degree. What are you giving back to the American child? What are you contributing to the American child? How are you making life for children and this culture better? And I don't have much evidence of that. Not much evidence of that at all. Where are good games? Where are programs for children based out of your profits? I think they have a moral obligation there. Maybe they don't perceive that. They're making a huge amount of money. This is very profitable, extraordinarily profitable. Where is that money going?
All right. Senator Lieberman.
Thank you, Senator Cole, and thanks to all the members of the panel. Just hearing what you've said now, we're also repelled. We're disgusted by this material. And yet it is a measure of our values in this society that we resist the impulse to do what I think, let me say for myself, I'd like to do. I'd like to be able to pass a law saying you can't produce this stuff anymore. We don't do that because we value our freedoms. But with those rights that the producers of video games in this case have also come responsibilities. And that's been the partner to rights in our society. And I think what we're all saying is that we don't feel that this particular industry has carried out those responsibilities in the way that they should, and now's the time to change. Dr. Page, I want to ask you, because you spoke about the literature in this area, and just in the interest of fairness, I guess I'd say, is there any, and you have basically summarized the literature that demonstrates that violent TV programming in this case and has a link to raising children's subsequent levels of aggression. With regard to the video game industry, there's a much smaller set of experiments or studies that have been done, but it seems to be heading in the same direction. But in fairness, I wanted to ask you this. Is there any substantial body of opinion within the profession that argues against those conclusions? Are there
against the conclusions about television, or the conclusions about video games?
Conclusions about violence on television increasing the aggressive behavior of children?
A very, very, very small minority. It's now become a consensus belief that all of the issues that I listed as effects are in fact effects on children.
Okay. And Dr. Provenzo, I take it that you agree with that? That in your familiarity with the literature, the strong preponderance of opinion is that there is a link here between...
Yes, very definitely. And I think another thing to point out here is that the video game literature, which I've reviewed very carefully from the psychological point of view, psychological studies, are all from the early 80s, as you pointed out. And they're based on arcade games, Space Invaders.
Right.
And those are shoot 'em up with, and they're highly depersonalized.
Right.
There are 3 or 4 generations of video games. There's Pong, there's things like Space Invaders, there's Nintendo with cartoon figures. We're into the next stage right now, which is Night Trap type games, and there's a new stage after this, which is the combining of this with virtual reality devices. I mean, imagine this game with iPhones that bring sense around, digital contact devices, data gloves, those types of things. That's the other level, and we're beginning to move into that. Sega, to my knowledge, has got a new wraparound vision screen available right now. At least it's been advertised, or it's coming out. Maybe they could provide some more information about that. But that's where kids literally physically participate in the violence. You see, the studies that need to be done, we need to redo all the classic television studies where we observed, how kids responded to the violence they saw on television. We need to redo all of those things in the context of watching a game like Night Trap. We don't know what the results are, but we can pretty much make some guesses.
Well, this leads me to my next question, which is, it has been my personal reaction, and I'm not a professional in this, that if we have established in this long series of studies a link between TV violence and aggressive behavior by children who watch it, then it should be even more so with video games, because the child is more actively involved in the video game. I mean, he's not just watching, he's making the violence happen. Now, has that been tested yet, or it hasn't been?
No, Go ahead.
The only, again, his point is the studies were done in the early 80s. There have been a couple of studies which have found that the kids in the experiments who played the violent video games also had a partner coupled with them who only watched. And what they found was that the effect on both the player and the watcher were very similar, and both of those children were significantly more aggressive after the game playing time. Again, that's only 1 or 2 studies. There really needs to be a body of upwards of 100 or more studies looking at this issue from all angles before it'll be as definitive as the research on television. However, given the similarities of the game playing and the television watching, I would be amazed if we don't find either similar effects and or effects that are stronger.
I'm struck by the point that Ms. Droz makes about the particular impact on the gender difference here. And it's been my experience with my kids and other kids that it is true that I'm curious as to whether any of you know whether this is true, that boys tend to play these games much more than girls. Young boys tend to play much more than girls. Therefore, when I see the obvious sexual aggression against the woman in Night Trap, which kids do have access to, I worry that we're not only perpetuating the gender stereotypes we talked about in terms of skills, but we're running the risk of increasing the probability that these boys who are playing these games are going to be more sexually aggressive and abusive as a result of the experiences they've had with the games. Now, again, that's a personal, sort of professional reaction. Is there anything in the literature or in your experience, your studies, to suggest that that's true?
There has been studies that have shown that the more violence a child or a male adult watches, the more likely that they will be insensitive to victims of sexual crimes. There's been enough research out there, I think, to state with all fairness that the more violence that a young boy watches at an early age, the less likely they will be sensitive to women's issues. I think if you look at our healthcare cost and see the rising cost of women being treated in hospitals for domestic violence, I think it bears truth. And there's enough proof on that right now. It has not been done. This is the first generation we have right now where we have a large mass of young boys being exposed to sexual violence, where not only can they just observe it, but as Dr. Provenzo pointed out, they are causing and controlling the movement. So they are getting all the effects of doing the movement except for the actual tactile of skin on skin.
Right. Dr. Provenzo?
There's a parallel issue, and I would say it's relevant here in terms of violence against women, which is there is a new field emerging called cybersex and dildonics. That's not a joke. And what it amounts to is pornography being placed on CD-ROM technology. And essentially what it comes down to is you can dial up what you want in terms of a blonde or red-headed brunette, male or female, dress the person up, get them to do various things you want them to do. Now my concern with that is either I'm not sure if it's possible to have more benign forms of that, but if that stuff gets into the hand, imagine that getting into the hands of a 13 or 14-year-old who's had no sexual experience or encounters, and they work on those models in the video game context or in the computer context for 3 or 4 years, and then they finally meet, a real woman on a date. I would not want to date that kid, frankly.
Right.
I mean, that's very scary. And I think some of the stuff in terms of the type of thing you're saying here, I mean, look at the portrayal of the woman there in the image from Night Trap. I mean, there are obviously sexual overtones operating there to a large degree.
I thought I was moved by your statement, which is one that parents must all feel, which is they wouldn't want their daughters going out with a boy who had just been playing one of these video games.
That's right.
Part of this whole, part of the outrage here and the anger and the frustration, of course, is just what you testified to, which is that parents increasingly feel that they're losing the battle for their children to other forces in our society. And this is part of it. Yes. 2
points. One is, I just want to make it clear, and I know it just hasn't come up in this hearing today, and that is that there are a number of major and primary causes for human aggression and for violence in kids. And video games and TV violence may or may not be part of it for any one child or group of children. But having said that, I want to mention a second thing, because it's come up in the recent debate, national debate about violent video games. There are some folks who believe that violent video games can drain away aggression, that after kids play a violent video game, they in fact will have a cathartic effect and will be less violent.
Yeah, I've heard
that's a great theory, and it makes for very lousy research. The research, especially in the area of TV violence, points in the exact opposite direction. So kids, after playing a video game, may or may not feel more relaxed, may or may not feel less frustrated, may or may not feel better about themselves, but the research indicates, both from TV and from the early studies on video games, that they're not going to be any less aggressive, that their attitudes about aggression will not have changed or decreased. In fact, they probably, if anything, will have increased, and I think that point needs to be made.
Dr. Provenzo, you indicated that in your book, and I know you have in your book, state that video games are not only violent and sexist, but they're also racist. Can you just briefly give us a few examples of what you mean?
Sure. In interviews with children, what I found was that they talked about the ninjas as being bad. And then you asked them who the ninjas were, and they were sort of like the Japs and the Chinese. Yeah. And it turns out that they perceive Asians, any Asian, as being extremely violent, as being dangerous, as being evil. It's operating at a very basic level and at times simplistic. It carries over into other areas as well. There is depictions, I believe, although it's hard to prove, but my perception of homophobia operating, in terms of how certain types of women are portrayed. I think that there are also things about race in terms of black and color issues that are clearly there. They're subtle and they're hard to get at sometimes, but I think they present a rather disturbing world. Could I make one comment about the gender issue, which, following up on what Ms. Strauss was saying? There's another issue that I found in my research that I think is very important, and that is that I interviewed children, girls in particular, large numbers of them, and they basically said, I don't like video games, I don't like computers, I think I would like them, but I don't like what they're about, is what they said essentially. Can you go advise, I mean, I would have third graders say, what are some good games I can play? Yeah. Now my argument here would be simply, if it's important as you're arguing, which I think is critical, that video games, and as the industry people often argue, that video games are the first introduction for children into the culture of computing, then we're discriminating against girls by providing them with these consistent negative images because they get turned off to computers at a very early stage. And if those are really, if these are tools for the 21st century in a certain sense that they need to master, we're driving them away from these tools, and I think that's very objectionable.
My time's up. Thank you all.
Senator Dorgan.
Thank you very much. Ms. Strauss, we have testimony that will be submitted later, some of which has already been submitted by Mr. Tom Zito, who's not with us, President and CEO of...
I am here, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Zito is here. I see. Okay, Mr. Zito has presented testimony. Mr. Zito says that Night Trap was set out to create a spoof of vampire films. And then Mr. White from Sega, Vice President of Sega, who will testify in the next panel, says in 5 mitigating points responding to the controversy over Night Trap is that the controversial scene, apparently the one we've just seen and the one I've seen before, is displayed only when the game player loses. Does that make you feel any better?
Oh, it makes me feel a lot better that if you're a loser, you're dead. No, it doesn't. We're dealing with self-esteem in here. There are many magazines out on the market, like the several I brought in here today. These magazines are filled with game tips on how to play the game, that in no time at all, children become winners in kill, and their kill ratio goes up. It tells them the secret codes and exactly what to do to become successful in murder. My statement to people who feel that there are some value to these games is, if the Pentagon was to ever have suggested years ago that we put video games that teach children how to aim guns and train them at the age of 8 to be soldiers and to and ever invented a game to put into the homes of young boys to train them to be in the military, I can't begin to tell you, you know what kind of uproar there would be in this country if our government was to start training early killers.
Commander Sims at the beginning of Night Traps looks at you straight in the eye and he says, quote, if you don't have the brains or guts for this mission, then give control to someone who does. That's what it says at the beginning of the game. The head of the SWAT team, or excuse me, it's the SCAT. It's the Sega something or other, you know, SWAT team is what it comes down to. So there's this sort of fascist military type with a, you know, police cap on looking at you and saying, if you're not man enough to do this, forget it, you know? You don't deserve to play this game.
So obviously it's not directed for the other half of the population.
Well, this Mr. Zito in his testimony also says the only thing worse than a violent video game is the even more frightening suggestion of censorship. I understand his concern about censorship, and I guess since in the 13 years that I've served here in the United States Congress, that you will not find a congressional record that I've left that represents a belief in censorship. I think censoring what people can say or see or do or think is a trail that's a long, tortured, dangerous trail. On the other hand, the interest in creating, with new technology, interactive video games for the entertainment of adults, and the difficulty in dealing with those kinds of games and the access to those games by children is something that we cannot ignore. Senator Lieberman has a young daughter, I have young children. The fact is, games, video games, are an exploding industry in this country. What I see on some of these video games is exactly what I've seen on television. An incredible sensationalist approach to glamorizing violence, going more and more towards the edge, a collapsing of values, and I worry about it. I don't know exactly what the solution is, but I know that to those who produce Night Trap, my personal observation is I think it's pathetic and shameful that the conclusion of a game like that, a quote game unquote, is to drill into a woman's neck, to grab a woman with a metal hook. I mean, I don't view that as constructive entertainment. Now, should we censor it? I don't believe much in censorship, but moving down the road to try to find how do we prevent children from having access to that sort of glorification of violence, and I agree with Senator Lieberman, violence I think that is directed all too often against women. I think the search for that answer is a constructive search for all of us, and this panel I think has presented some extraordinarily thoughtful testimony for which I'm grateful.
Senator Cole, if I may just ask one final question, just to pick up on something you said so I'm clear in understanding it, because it goes directly to the announcement by the industry today. When we're talking about a rating system, did I clearly understand you to say earlier that we ought not to be content just with the MA-17 or MA-13, but that we ought to require that there be some a narrative describing, for instance, saying that this, assuming we can't convince the companies to stop doing it, this Mortal Kombat, this game includes scenes of decapitation, et cetera, et cetera. Night Trap, there's violence against a woman in this. Is that what you're suggesting?
That's correct. I think there needs to be something more than parental discretion advised, that variation on the theme. I actually applaud Sega's beginning the process of having a rating system. I simply would like to see a more detailed rating system that gives parents who have the ultimate obligation in this area for younger children more information so they can make a studied judgment.
Senator,
yes.
The NCTV had a rating scale back in 1989 to measure video games. We're currently in the process right now of revising it, where there would be a range of violence that you can play, from the very lowest, of course, always being don't put the game in the cartridge, but to how many acts of violence that can be done in 1 minute. You know, when we have always monitored television, and we do acts of violence per hour. When we monitor video games, we go down to acts of violence per minute. And I would like to see the rating scale be a system where it would measure the amount of sexual references or sexual activities that can be done, and the act of violence. Senator Dorgan is familiar with our work, and he knows that we take a strong stand against censorship. We're strong components of the Constitution. But everything that touches children, from the pajamas they wear to the toothbrush that they use at night, is governed by regulations, and all our regulations are concerned with their physical safety. I think we need to, some point in our life, look at the internal safety, and let's also look at the safety of the child who's sitting next to the child whose parents are unable or unwilling to keep night riders out of their home.
Final answer, yes, Dr. Provenza.
I'd like to make a suggestion that I don't think is that difficult to do. I'd like to see violence portrayed accurately. I would like to see in television violence, when someone is shot in the leg, someone isn't winged, but what really happens to them. I would like to see in a video game that if you punch someone viciously, they don't get up and walk away immediately and take another punch. I think the kids do not understand. When I interview children, spend a lot of time out in the field interviewing kids, and they don't understand what guns and hitting does. And I think they need to understand that, and they don't get that communicated to them through either television or video games at all. They think that guns aren't that serious. They don't understand that guns kill people, or that when a gun goes through your leg, you may not walk again, or you may lose your leg because your leg may explode. They don't understand any of that.
Thank you all. Thank you.
One final question. Do you think that their announcement this morning is an attempt to defuse or to take the wind out of the sail of any potential congressional action?
I personally think that the parents of the United States, thanks to some of the effort on people on the panel and definitely the attention that Senator Lieberman gave last week, and the building anger of parents regarding the violence that our children are exposed to, has reached such a momentum in this country that I don't think the American people will allow the video industry to put up a smoke screen. And after talking to some of the people in the industry today, I do feel that they are sincere. And I would like to feel that after 23 years of working with kids, it's kind of hard to lie to me. And I'm really hoping that they will work together with people who have been working with children and let's work and solve this problem. There is potential here. We have to tap into it.
I think we should view it as a positive step. Whatever the motivation, and I certainly wouldn't want to give anything as far as whatever that motivation may be. It's a positive step to doing what's necessary to protect our children and to do what's right.
Very good. We thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Before we go to the second panel, I'd like to simply say that Senators McCain and Gordon have filed statements that will appear on the record with this committee. Senator Lieberman.
Thank you, Senator Cole. And thank the members of the first panel. Let me now call the second panel to the table. Howard Lincoln, Senior Vice President of Nintendo of America, Bill White, Senior Vice President of Sega of America, Eileen Rosenthal, who is the General Counsel of the Software Publishers Association, Dawn Wiener, President of the Video Software Dealers Association, and Craig Johnson, who is the past President of the Amusement and Music Operators Association. We thank all of you for coming here, and we look forward to your testimony. Now that we're having technical difficulties with the lighting system. The green light is not working. There'll be, I guess, a yellow light flashing when you're heading to the end of your 5 minutes. And okay, we're actually going to try to change the bulbs here. There's a joke here somewhere, but we'll decide on it later. Mr. Lincoln, why don't you begin?
Thank you, Senator. Senator Cole, Senator Lieberman, Senator Dorgan. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you to discuss this issue of violence in video games. Nintendo is just as concerned about the issue of violence, whether in movies, television, or video games, as anyone in this room. Of course, every entertainment executive tells Congress that, but Nintendo can back it up. In the mid-1980s, when Nintendo entered the video game business in this country, the issue of violence in video games was not in the public's eye. But just like today, there was a computer software industry selling video games, and some of these games contained excessive violence and pornographic material. We didn't want Nintendo's name associated with this kind of product. Even then, we were concerned about game content. So in 1985, when we launched our first Nintendo home video game system, we made a conscious business decision not to allow excessively violent, sexually explicit, or other offensive games in our system. We incorporated a patented security chip in all Nintendo hardware and software, and this enabled us to review and approve the content of all video games played on Nintendo's hardware, either video games sold directly by Nintendo or games marketed by our approximately 70 independent third-party licensee companies. Nintendo has video game guidelines which control game content, and we've applied these to every one of the more than 1,200 games released into the marketplace by Nintendo and its licensees. Using these guidelines, we prohibit a number of things, including sexually suggestive or explicit content, random, gratuitous, or excessive violence, graphic illustration of death, excessive force in sports games, ethnic, racial, religious, nationalistic, or sexual stereotypes, profanity or obscenity, or the use of illegal drugs. And over the last 8 years, these guidelines have kept an enormous amount of offensive material, including excessive violence, out of American homes. And specific examples are contained in the statement that I've submitted to you. Of course, our game guidelines are not perfect and may not answer everyone's concerns. After all, video games are a form of entertainment covering everything from education to the martial arts. But I must say that we have made a good faith effort to keep offensive material off our game systems, and we intend to continue applying our game guidelines in the future. In the past year, some very violent and offensive games have reached the market. And of course, I'm speaking about Mortal Kombat and Night Trap. And let me say that for the record, I want to state that Night Trap will never appear on a Nintendo system. Obviously, it would not pass our guidelines. This game, which as you've indicated, promotes violence against women, simply has no place in our society. Let me turn to Mortal Kombat. To meet our game guidelines, we insisted that one of our largest licensees, Acclaim Entertainment, remove the blood and death sequences present in the arcade version of Mortal Kombat before we would approve this game. We did this knowing that our competitor would leave these scenes in, and with full knowledge that we would make more money if we included the offensive material. We knew that we would lose money by sanitizing Mortal Kombat, but sanitize it we did. And unfortunately, I must say that we have been criticized by literally thousands of young game players for insisting that the death sequences be removed from this game.
What's been the form of that criticism?
We've received letters. We've received literally thousands of phone calls.
People actually call and write to complain that they can't have the more violent game on the Nintendo system.
That's correct. The letters and the phone calls essentially say, leave in the violence. You're censoring. Now, we share Congress's and the public's growing concern with violence, and as a worldwide video game industry leader, Nintendo, of course, will do everything it can, working with you and your staffs and with all of the other companies in our industry, to develop a workable game rating system. But a rating system is no substitute for corporate responsibility. And rating games will not make them less violent. Only manufacturers acting responsibly can do that by controlling game content and keeping outrageous games like Night Trap off the market. We agree with your recommendation that a game rating system is needed. To be effective, it has to be comprehensive, uniform, and understandable. And of course, it has to have broad industry and public participation in its formulation. And it has to have credibility. A self-administered rating system is confusing, probably does more harm than good. In conclusion, regardless of what happens here in Congress, Nintendo will sponsor industry forums in early 1994 to discuss game content guidelines and work out a comprehensive game rating system. And to advance that cause, Nintendo will work with entertainment software publishers, game developers, hardware manufacturers, retailers, consumer advocacy groups, and other interested third parties to assemble the first industry-wide forum on these subjects. And certainly we invite you and your staff to attend. But really, in the end, the real issue here is not about game ratings. It's about exercising corporate responsibility. We've done this since we've gotten into this business, and we're going to continue to do it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lincoln. Mr. White, you're next.
Chairman Lieberman, Chairman Cole, and Senator Dorgan, my name is William White. I'm Vice President of Marketing and Communications for Sega of America and a father of 2 boys, aged 5 and 8. Sega of America is headquartered in Redwood City, California, and we develop 70% of our games here in the United States. Since mounting a serious challenge to Nintendo's monopoly over the video game market in 1991, we have won nearly half of the total U.S. video game market. I'm pleased to present Sega's views on how we can best ensure that all consumers, especially parents, have the information they need to make appropriate choices among interactive video products for their family, be it a single-person household or a household where children reside. I want to address 3 key points. First, the fallacy that Sega and the rest of the digital interactive media industry only sell games to children. In fact, our consumer base is much broader. Second, efforts Sega has already made to provide parents with the information they need to distinguish between interactive media products which are appropriate for young people and those which are not. And third, efforts Sega is currently undertaking to gain the cooperation of all digital interactive media companies to develop an industry-wide rating system. In recent days, the glare of the media spotlight on this issue has resulted in the circulation of a number of distorted and inaccurate claims. The most damaging of these distortions, in my view, is the notion that Sega and the rest of the digital interactive industry are only in the business of selling games to children. This is not the case. Yes, many of Sega's interactive video titles are intended and purchased for young children. Many other Sega titles, however, are intended for and purchased by adults for their personal entertainment and education. The average Sega CD user is almost 22 years old, and only 5% are under the age of 13. The average Sega Genesis user is almost 19 years old, and fewer than 30% are under age 13. There truly is something for everyone in our software catalog, and the variety of available software is multiplying each day. Interactive media should be treated no differently than television, motion picture, the recording, music, or publishing industries. Attempts to relegate digital interactive software to a media backwater are outdated and we believe inappropriate. It makes no more sense to conclude today that digital interactive media is only for children than it would have when Gutenberg's press was in its infancy to conclude that the printed word was only for Bible readers. Digital interactive media will communicate increasingly diverse information to an increasingly diverse audience. In fact, it has already began. Looking at our most recent data for 1993, action-adventure titles such as Sonic Spinball and Jurassic Park account for 40% of the revenue from our library. Sports titles such as NBA Action 94, World Series Baseball, and Joe Montana Football account for 35% of revenues. Fighting games such as X-Men and Eternal Champions comprised 13% of revenues. Titles in the children and entertainment categories such as Barney and Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego and Fun and Games produce 5% of our revenues. Role-playing games such as Landstalker make up 5% of revenue, and strategy and puzzle games such as Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine constitute 2% of revenues. As you can see, evolving interactive technology has spawned a huge market that goes well beyond the child-oriented directed titles that gave the industry its start. Clearly, whatever Congress might do would affect a large, diverse group of consumers, young and old, in a volatile industry only in its infancy. Information, not regulation, is the appropriate policy. Last week, Bob Keeshan, who I knew as Captain Kangaroo growing up, said this, quote, "When all is said, it is the parent or guardian who must be the final arbiter of what is appropriate for a child. Give parents the information needed to make an intelligent, informed decision." We agree. Last September, Sega completed its phased implementation of a comprehensive parental guidance program, which we began developing over a year and a half ago. The Sega program is a three-pronged approach designed to help parents determine the age appropriateness of different interactive video software. It includes a rating classification system, a toll-free hotline, and an informational brochure. Building on the motion picture industry model, the Sega rating system applies one of 3 classifications to each interactive program released by Sega: GA for general audiences, MA13 for mature audiences age 13 and over, and MA17, adult appropriate, not suitable for those under 17. We established a toll-free hotline, staffed more than 70 hours a week by professionals who can supplement the rating classification by informing parents about the specific content of each title. The Everyone Wins brochure, written by Scholastic, Inc., the nation's leading educational publishing company, has helped to publicize and explain the new rating system. Sega's rating system has been carried out by the Video Game Rating Council, created by Sega and consisting of independent experts in the areas of child psychology, sociology, cinema, and education. The Council is responsible for evaluating each game and designating it with the appropriate rating classification. I want to emphasize that this is an independent council. Even though it takes considerable time to evaluate each product, individual council members are paid only a small honorarium for each game they rate. And now, we and others in this industry are prepared to take the next step. This morning, a number of interactive video companies and some of the nation's leading retailers announced their plan for creating the type of industry-wide rating system you have called for. The coalition committed to this effort includes Atari, 3DO, Walmart, Sears, Toys R Us, and Blockbuster Video, and the video game software publishers representing over 90% of the Sega video game market. Sega was a catalyst in producing this collaborative effort, and we hope that our rating system will serve as a model for the larger industry approach. The Software Publishers Association, the Video Software Dealers Association, and the Children's Advertising Review Unit of the Better Business Bureau have also pledged to provide leadership in this process. The goal of the industry coalition is to develop and implement a rating system that enjoys widespread acceptance and voluntary participation throughout the industry at all levels of product distribution, is uniform and consistent, has a high degree of consumer awareness and understanding, and has the cooperation of retailers to enforce the program at point of sale. Chairman Lieberman and Chairman Cole, I would like to extend an invitation to you and to your staff to join the industry coalition when it meets for its first working session at the Winter Consumer Electronics Show in early January. Your leadership and guidance will undoubtedly improve the process we are engaging upon and will help us establish a meaningful and effective rating system. There is every reason to be optimistic about the industry's ability to voluntarily provide parental guidance, but we ask that you treat digital interactive media as you have treated other media, such as the motion picture industry. Give parents the power to choose what's right for their kids, but don't tell adults what's right for them. Sega of America looks forward to continuing to work with this panel, other leaders in Congress, and every responsible member of the industry to better inform parents about the age appropriateness and content of all interactive media products. Thank you for the opportunity to share Sega's views. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. White. Now, Ms. Rosenthal, representing the Software Publishers Association.
Thank you. Chairman Lieberman, Chairman Cole, Senator Dorgan, thank you for the opportunity to appear today to discuss the creation of a uniform rating or labeling standard for video and computer interactive games. My name is Eileen Rosenthal, and I'm the General Counsel of the Software Publishers Association. More importantly, Senator Lieberman, I am by birth and at heart a native from the great state of Connecticut. The Software Publishers Association is the principal trade association of the personal computer software industry. SPA has a membership of over 1,000 companies and represents 90% of the personal computer software sold worldwide. Its members range from such well-known companies as Adobe, Apple, Broderbund, Computer Associates, Davidson and Associates, IBM, 3DO Company, Knowledge Adventure, Sega, Philips Interactive Media of America, Time Warner Electronic Publishing, Sony Electronic Publishing, Pioneer New Media Technologies, Interplay Productions, Novell, and Symantec, to hundreds of smaller companies, all of which develop and market consumer, business, and education software. SPA members sold more than $30 billion of packaged software in 1992. Mr. Chairman, I ask that my written statement be entered into the record. Today, I would like to make the following 3 points. First, on behalf of the SPA, I would like to commend you, Chairman Lieberman, Chairman Cole, and members of the committees, for the work that you have done to address the problems of youth violence in our society. Our culture is inundated with violent and sexual content that is constantly being broadcast to our youth through television, movies, radios, and books. As the video game industry has grown, we are finding that some products have begun to incorporate violent and explicit themes. It is inevitable that some of these products will find their way into the hands of children. In our attempt to protect our children from those video and computer games which contain violent and mature themes, however, we must not lose sight of the fact that the vast majority of video and computer games are appropriate for children and have the potential for developing many important and socially desirable skills. For example, it is a fact that children who are labeled as having short attention spans can focus for hours on a video or computer game, discovering rules and patterns by an active and interactive process of trial and error. Surely the potential of this medium for bettering our children's education and thinking skills is enormous. I was sitting next to, in the first part of the panel, Mr. Terry Valesky, who's the Senior Vice President of Marketing at Atari. He was telling me what Atari has recently done. They've taken their newest video machine, which is called the Jaguar, and brought it to cancer wards of children's hospitals throughout the country. He told me it was amazing to see how these children who are victims of a disease that are taking over their life felt empowered when they could act and interact with new technology, when they could shoot down a spaceship. There's many very positive things that come from the new technology. And even the literature that the Children's Television Research and Education Center presents, Dr. Page, of course, represents them today. In the literature, it asks the question, is there anything good about playing video games? And the answer is, sure there is. Like puzzles, board games, and other forms of interactive entertainment, playing videos can help kids relax, learn new game strategies, develop concentration skills, and achieve goals. If they are playing with others, it can also be a great time for socialization. I also thought it would be interesting to note that SPA puts out each month the top-selling software. In September 1993, the majority of the software titles, game titles, that are most sold are ones that really have nothing to do with violence, and I know that this committee will find that interesting. Microsoft Flight Simulator, Privateer, which is a spaceship arcade role-playing game, Front Page Sports, which is a football game, X-Wing, Lands of Lore, which is a fantasy role-playing, SimCity. I'm not going to go on with naming all of these, but many of these games are good, fun games. Finally, I just want to point out that computer-based games traditionally have been targeted to an older audience than some of the original video games. That's because, in part, they're geared to an audience that uses computers and keyboards, and the target audience age has been 18 to 45. But on to my second point. After talking to industry...
Excuse me, I don't want to censor you either, but the red light's on, so to the extent that you can, if you would try to summarize the second and third points.
I certainly will. Thank you. My second point is that after talking to industry leaders such as Sega, 3DO, Philips Interactives, hundreds of our SPA members, the Video Software Dealers Association, SPA is pleased to pledge its support to do whatever is required to help the industry create a uniform and fair system that will provide parents and consumers with the information they need to make informed choices when purchasing or renting video and computer games. In just the past 2 days, SPA has received over 130 letters from entertainment software developers developers, asking it to take the lead in working with industry to develop, implement, and administer such a system. This outpouring of support from so many companies is a reflection of the industry's commitment to the well-being of America's children. I would like to submit these letters to the committee. Finally, my third point is that we should note that the issue is not whether to place a rating on video and computer game products. Many leading entertainment companies already place ratings on their products, particularly products that contain graphic violence or sexually explicit material. Rather, the issue is how best to create, promote, and enforce a standard that is helpful to parents in selecting appropriate products for their children. This is clearly a job for industry, and it is our intention to step forward and do that job. At the request of its members, the SPA has joined with other concerned parties present today to initiate the process of developing and implementing a uniform rating or labeling standard. We anticipate working with experts in the fields of child psychology, sociology, and education, as well as industry leaders, this committee, and national education and parent teachers groups to set guidelines for determining suitable content for children of various ages. The process will be an open one, and all interested parties are invited to participate. The first steps of the process will begin in just a few weeks with a meeting of interested parties at the Consumer Electronics Show, an appropriate professional forum for such a meeting. It is our intention to complete development of the uniform rating standard within the coming year. Mr. Chairman, the SPA is pleased to facilitate and support the effort to create and administer a uniform standard. Our industry has a strong tradition of social responsibility and action in the public interest, and this issue will be no exception. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roosevelt. Just to clarify, just as a matter of fact, you mentioned Apple and IBM belong to the association. They're not involved in what we're talking about here. Is that right? In other words, in the video games, you also represent software publishers who, in that sense, create the games that are then produced by Nintendo, Sega, whatever. Is that correct?
Yes, we represent, well, actually, in some cases, the hardware companies also distribute software products, so they would be involved. But we do, we represent many of the software producers of computer interactive games.
Right, so that in the case of Mortal Kombat, for instance, that was a game that was not developed by Sega or Nintendo. It was developed by someone else, and they licensed it from that person. That's the way the business works.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and next, Dawn Wiener, who's the president of the Software Dealers Association.
Good afternoon, Senator Cole, Senator Lieberman, and Senator Dorgan. I am Dawn Wiener, president of the Video Software Dealers Association, and we are the national trade organization that represents the $16 billion home video industry. I am also president and the principal stockholder of Home Video Plus in Austin, Texas. I've been in the retail home video business for more than 10 years and have served on the VSDA Board of Directors for 4 years. With more than 4,000 member companies, VSDA's home video entertainment network encompasses some 20,000 retail locations, representing more than 80% of the industry's total annual revenue. Each week, approximately 57 million consumers visit home video stores to rent and purchase pre-recorded videos, video games, and a growing array of home entertainment products. Interactive video game rentals and sales are one of the fastest growing segments of our business. With the rapid growth of CD-ROM and other interactive video formats, we anticipate that this form of home entertainment will become an increasingly important component of our industry. But the explosion of the interactive video game market is a relatively recent phenomenon. The video game industry is still in an early stage of development. As president of the Video Dealers Association, and perhaps more importantly as a mother of 3 children, I am very concerned about the depictions of gratuitous violence in all forms of entertainment. But I am also concerned about governmental actions that may endanger 2 of our most cherished freedoms, freedom of expression and the freedom to make our own individual choices concerning our private lives. We believe the creation of any governmental or quasi-governmental organization, such as the proposed National Independent Council for Entertainment and Video Devices, is unnecessary. And let me tell you why. A few months ago, we began working with video game manufacturers and others involved in the interactive video game industry to create a comprehensive, industry-wide voluntary rating system for interactive video. We have announced a major video game and new technology conference for April 10th and 11th in Chicago, where interactive video manufacturers, distributors, and retailers will meet to discuss a variety of issues, including content and ratings. We see a very high degree of agreement among the manufacturers about the need for a comprehensive rating system and the desire to implement such a system. The Software Publishers Association has taken the lead in developing this rating system with participation from both manufacturers and retailers. One company, Sega of America, has already put in place a ratings program for its own games. We believe this is an excellent starting point. As the Los Angeles Times said in a recent editorial concerning video game content, Sega's leadership should be applauded. The industry recognizes that it is now time to implement an industry-wide rating system. We believe such a voluntary rating system will address the concerns of this panel and indeed of the American people regarding interactive video content. Our work with the rating system operated by the Motion Picture Association of America gives us the experience and the confidence to make such a statement. The MPAA rating system, which was introduced in 1968, has proven to be very successful and an effective tool to help parents decide which movies are appropriate for viewing for their children. This rating system has been used effectively by video retailers for many years to enforce in-store policies regarding the rental and sale of video product to minors. In 1991, VSDA formalized the use of the MPAA system through the introduction of our Pledge to Parents program, which established an industry standard restricting the rental and sale to minors of R and NC-17 rated materials. Through our Pledge to Parents program, we provide our members with a parental consent form, store poster, and other materials that they can use to explain this policy to their customers. We also require all members of our home video entertainment network to sign a certification promising to make every effort never to rent, sell, or give any video product rated NC-17 to persons under the age of 17, or any video product restricted R to persons under the age of 17 without parental consent. These efforts are designed to give parents the information they need to make informed choices about entertainment product for their children. This program is working extremely well. Consumers understand the rating system and use it to evaluate video product. Since the introduction of the Pledge to Parents program, we have had very few consumer complaints about minors obtaining inappropriate video products from our members. With the growth of interactive video products, concerns about content have shifted to this arena. Today, you have challenges to move ahead quickly with the implementation of a video game rating system. We accept this challenge, and I firmly believe the American people will be far better served by a voluntary system than by any government-imposed or prescribed system. The VSDA and our 20,000-store home video entertainment network pledge to support the video game manufacturers by working with our members to enforce the voluntary system now under development by restricting the access of minors to inappropriate video games. Our members are not only video retailers and business people, but many are mothers and fathers who are concerned about the future of their children. We believe a voluntary rating system for interactive video will protect our children while preserving our cherished freedoms of expression and choice. Thank you for the opportunity to express the views of the Video Software Dealers Association and its nationwide home video entertainment network of retail stores.
Thank you, Ms. Weiner. And finally on this panel, Mr. Craig Johnson of the Amusement and Music Operators Association, which I assume includes what we might call arcades or other places where video games are played.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here.
My name is Craig Johnson, and I am the immediate past president of the Amusement Music Operators Association, better known as AMOA. Our association is a 1,700-member association made up of owner-operators of coin-operated amusement devices such as video games. I think it is important to note that our membership deals in commercially placed amusement devices and does not, as a rule, deal in the home video game market. I also think it important to note that as owner-operators of amusement devices, we do not manufacture amusement devices. We do, as AMOA, however, have in our membership some 140 manufacturers. I'm here today to address the concerns of video game violence from the point of view of the commercial game owner, the individual that has invested a significant amount of money in owning and operating video games. Our association, our most recent convention, October 21st of this year, took a position and expressed our concerns to the manufacturers and the industry as a whole. Our position states, AMOA believes that the current trend of the escalating use of violence in video games will prove to be detrimental to the industry in the long term. We are currently seeing parents and safety advocate groups speaking out against video games and their use of graphic violence. AMOA believes that it is indeed possible to design successful video games without the use of graphic violence. AMOA believes that if the graphic use of violence continues, our industry will suffer repercussions similar to the regulatory backlashes of the early 1980s, with state and local governments receiving pressure to further regulate and tax the industry. AMOA encourages all manufacturers to design games with wide appeal and design without the excessive use of graphic violence. That's the end of our position. While AMOA does not manufacture video games and cannot control what designers put into their games, we do believe that the violence in the games would best be controlled within the industry through self-policing policies. At least in the coin-op side of the industry, this is a relatively new issue, and most games that are now on the streets in commercial operation have been under design for some time. In many cases, the design of video games takes over 1 year to complete. We appreciate the attention Congress is giving the issue. Your interest will help our industry focus on the situation and the solution. I encourage you to allow the industry time to take care of their own problems and to limit and control the violence that is now in some games. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Thank you all. Mr. White, let me begin with you, and I suppose in one sense go to the heart of the matter. We saw the clip before from Night Trap with the woman being attacked, and I said earlier that I thought that violence was gratuitous and offensive and ought not to be available to people in our society. Mr. Lincoln, just here a few moments ago, as vice president of the other leading company in this field, Nintendo, said, and I quote, "This game simply has no place in our society." Why don't you agree? Why doesn't Sega just pull Night Trap off the market?
I think, Senator, with all due respect, the point I tried to make in my oral arguments and testimony was that this industry, as part of the interactive media industry, has grown tremendously. The children represent only a portion of the audience that we try to serve with our interactive software. Night Trap was developed specifically for an adult audience. Sega took a leadership position in establishing an independent rating council and appropriately labeled Night Trap MA-17 not appropriate for children. And we believe, just as Congress has treated the motion picture industry, that we as an industry should have an opportunity to regulate ourselves. I believe that we've taken that first step this morning in developing an industry-wide coalition to adopt an industry rating system with enforcement.
I must say that the exercise of responsibility, do you think it's even appropriate for you to be pushing that stuff out there for adult audiences to use? I mean, it's...
Well, I think it's appropriate.
With the way in which the woman is attacked. I mean, clearly she's dressed provocatively. She's brutally attacked by the people dressed in dark clothes there. Is that... Why even... You've mentioned a list of products that your company produces. A lot of them are great. Why do you need to go across that line and produce this stuff for adults or kids?
Let me make 2 points. First, if you showed only the violent and gory scenes from out of context consecutively, one after the other, from Roots or Gone with the Wind, you might conclude they're horrible films. But in reality, they aren't. And what you've done is picked a particular segment of that game. Let me clarify. A winning effort within Night Trap saves the women. Your job as the player is to identify the villains and to trap them. If you are a good player, you keep the villains from the women and men who are potential victims. This game is an appropriate game for adults that choose to entertain themselves in this way, shape, and form.
If you're a bad player, what happens?
If you're a bad player, you will see that scene.
The woman gets attacked.
The woman gets attacked.
You're going to have a long way to go to convince me that you're raising anyone's values or reducing anyone's inclination toward aggression, and particularly aggression toward women, by putting this on the market?
We agree with much of what was said on the earlier panel. We believe that more research is necessary to conclude the effect that these games are having on both adults and children. The point
well, why don't you
we want to make is that
until the research is done.
Until the research is done, we feel it's an appropriate step to develop an industry-wide rating system which has enforcement that will allow adults, which represent 60% of the players for the Sega CD system, to make the choice as to whether or not that game is right or wrong for them.
Let me talk to you about the rating system. I understand your argument. I disagree with it, that you have a broad market and it includes adults as well as kids. And you've set up the rating system to try to give advice as to how to distinguish. Incidentally, my staff, in going into a number of stores where your products are sold, has never seen that poster that you put up explaining what the rating system is. Is it displayed in stores?
Senator, I'm sorry, I did not mean to suggest that it was displayed in stores. It is part of our Everyone Wins brochure.
Okay, but it's
distributed at 2,800 retail outlets. We make it available to all of our key retailers. We also provide a holder for this, but ultimately it is the retailer's responsibility to keep it on the counter as opposed to behind the counter.
Well, at a minimum, I hope that you're doing everything you can, if you're basing your argument on the rating system, to make sure that people first understand what the rating system is, and then, as we'll show in some of the ads, at least get a chance to look at it. My staff went into Circuit City. Here's a brochure that you put out. Sega, Hot 93 titles.
Yes.
Okay, in the midst of this, you've got Night Trap right alongside, Joe Montana's NFL Football and Spider-Man versus Kingpin and Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, with no indication that of the content of this, and that you, as you said just now, expect this only to be bought by kids. So is this responsible advertising?
Senator Lieberman, we've taken the first step to what we believe is a more appropriate industry-wide rating system. Just as the motion picture industry produces films for children as well as for adults, the interactive entertainment industry, as it grows with the technology available, will continue to produce product that's appropriate for both children and adults. We would like to see better enforcement at retail. We would like to see the ratings prominently displayed in the advertising of all the games. That is a step that we will take with the industry-wide coalition.
Do you agree that this is irresponsible then? I mean, if
that was developed, Senator Lieberman, prior to our full implementation of the rating system. What I'm saying is that we as a company believe in the action and the steps that you're suggesting we take, and we're prepared to move in that direction.
You're saying, if your defense on Night Trap is that it's for your adult market, then it seems to me you got an obligation to put out a separate Hot 93 titles for adults instead of. This was just picked off the shelf by one of our staff people, and it was just done in the last week. Now, if you've updated your rating system, I hope that you'll also update your promotional system. Let me go on to one other aspect of this, and because I must say, you're here as the company. You're not the whole company, but I find the course of behavior by Sega the most objectionable here in these games that we're talking about. I want to show you the tape of an advertisement for Mortal Kombat. Now, this game is rated MA-13. It has the death scenes at the end that we talked about. MA-13 means that it's not appropriate for children under 13. But just take a look at this ad that Sega plays promoting Mortal Kombat and some other games, and tell me whether it doesn't have the effect of encouraging children under 13 to buy Mortal Kombat.
Of his peers. So he gets Sega Genesis, the
We're going to take it back to the beginning. Kathy, can you make that brighter at all?
Young Bobby Engels has a problem. He needs to earn the respect of his peers. So he gets Sega Genesis, the ultimate action system. And then he buys Mortal Kombat, the arcade edition, and the all-new Shinobi 3, and Marvel's X-Men. Now, things are pretty much okay.
I said chocolate chip. Say it. Say it. Sega!
Okay, to me, the, if I may, the nerd that you have made into a hero by encouraging him to buy Mortal Kombat looks to be under 13. The ad certainly is calculated to encourage kids to buy that game, and I'd be interested in knowing, apart from the content of the ad, which seems directed toward children, what you can possibly do in placing that ad on television to make sure that kids under 13 are not watching it and therefore feeling that their masculinity, or if not their freedom from bullies, will be determined by whether they play this game.
That advertisement was directed to teens specifically, not to children. I can't comment on the age of the cast within the commercial because I'm just not familiar with it. The intent with the Sega video game rating system and the independent counsel and the packaging guidelines that we've established, Senator, is to take a first step. And we're proud of that step we've taken. We don't believe it's perfect, but we do believe that more information and a better rating system is the answer, not regulation and certainly not censorship.
Well, you know, you've kept repeating it, and boy, I'd agree with you. The rating system is only a first step, and it is a fig leaf to cover a lot of transgressions if you do not spread out here and both enforce it better, and I hope apply a little bit of self-control to yourselves, but make sure it gets carried along, because that kid looks to me like he's under 13. Am I right that you have no way of, when you place an ad like that on television, guaranteeing that younger kids are not going to see it? There's no way you can do that. I presume you're placing it on children's shows.
No, that ad would not be permitted on children's television, and children's television shows were not bought as a part of that. But you're right. We buy television time that's directed towards teenagers or television time that's directed towards children. That ad was not approved for children's television. It was directed towards teenagers and on time that was purchased for directed at teenagers.
Okay. Again, in terms of your emphasis on the rating system, Attorney General Dan Lundgren of California, who is also not one of your fans, spoke with me the other day. And as you know, he's been troubled by the violence and graphic sex in the video games. He discussed with me and sent me an ad from GamePro magazine. Now, these involve Sega products, although I see that it's placed by Namco, so you'll have to tell me whether you're responsible for it.
Not. I'm sorry, we're not.
Okay, but let me just direct you, and I don't know to what extent you have any ability to control this. At the top, it says he's back. Splatterhouse 3 for the Sega Genesis is the kind of game rating systems were invented for. Now, and then it goes on at the bottom to advertise that it includes deadly new weapons, 6 levels of monster bashing mayhem, and killer special moves. Don't you agree that that kind of advertisement makes a mockery of your rating system? By that I mean to say the specific reference to this is the kind of game that rating systems were invented for.
I haven't seen this advertisement, Senator Lieberman, and we don't have control.
Got it now,
we don't have control over what an independent publisher would say about our system, nor, I believe, would the motion picture industry have control over what an individual studio might say about the MPAA guidelines.
But wouldn't you agree, just having seen it now, that that makes a mockery of your rating system? And I can't believe that's what you want your independent producers to do with your rating system.
We want to go to the next step, Senator, and that's why we've worked around the clock over the last 2 weeks to establish an industry coalition to work with your committee and the other members of Congress to develop an industry-wide system that will be more effective.
Okay, well, there's a lot of work to do. To put it mildly, Mr. Lincoln, let me just ask you one question. I appreciate the extent to which you have self-regulated to some degree, and I also appreciate the fact that you've accepted today the idea of a rating system, because even though the materials that you've been producing are less violent and less graphically sexual than others have, nonetheless there is violence in them. And it is still possible, obviously, for a parent buying a Nintendo game to not appreciate the level of violence in them. Dr. Provenzo, in his book, I think, which focused on Nintendo, felt that there was a lot of violence in the Nintendo products. My question is, I guess my point is that I appreciate the rating system that you've adopted, and I guess my question is, would you accept the responsibility to try to make sure that every link in the chain that Nintendo is involved in, such as the advertisements and the brochures that we've discussed with Mr. White, follows out carries out your desires with the rating system?
Well, we'll certainly do that. You know, the point that I'm making, Senator, is that the game ratings, it just doesn't go far enough. We have to get our hands on the game content. And we've been doing that, but like any other system, it's not perfect. Let me make just a couple of other points. I can't sit here and allow you to be told that somehow the video game business has been transformed today from children to adults. It hasn't been, and Mr. White, who is a former Nintendo employee, knows the demographics as well as I do. Furthermore, I can't let you sit here and buy this nonsense that this Sega Night Trap game was somehow only meant for adults.
I'm not
the fact of the matter is, this is a copy of the packaging. There was no rating on this game at all when the game was introduced. Small children bought this at Toys R Us, and he knows that as well as I do. When they started getting heat about this game, then they adopted the rating system and put ratings on it. But today, just as I'm sitting here, you can go into a Toys R Us store or a Walmart or a Kmart, and you know as well as I do that you can buy this product and no one, certainly no sales clerk at retail, is going to challenge you. So the point I'm getting at is putting these ratings on, if that's as far as we're going to go, isn't going to get us anywhere. We've got to get further into this. And let me say that I agree that everything that we've done has not been perfect. As a matter of fact, when I came into the hearing room this morning, I saw that you've got an advertisement up here for one of the Super Nintendo Entertainment System games that says they've got a bullet with your name on it. Right. Well, let me tell you what I did. I phoned my office to find out that that licensee put that advertisement out without our consent, without our review, and without our permission. And unless that advertisement is withdrawn, that company is in breach of its license agreement. So we do have, just as Sega does in the case of Namco, which is a Sega licensee, the ability and the right to control advertising by our licensees, and we take that seriously. And I'm going to apologize to this committee for the fact that we slipped up and our licensee didn't tell us about this. But let me tell you, when I get back to Seattle, I will call that licensee.
Well, thank you. Thanks for your forthrightness. Thanks for assuming responsibility. I believe you've shown some leadership here. You're not perfect, as you've said, but you've been a damn sight better than the competition.
Senator, may I make a comment, please? It's all well and good to say that we have content guidelines. Sega of America has content guidelines as well. I had the opportunity on Tuesday to meet with your staff and some of the others to show some of the Nintendo video games to the staff and compare the level of violence in the Nintendo video games to the same game on the Sega platform. And I'd be pleased to show a minute or a minute and a half of that comparison to demonstrate that the contents that, the guidelines that Mr. Lincoln speaks of continue to allow excessive violence in these games without the benefit of a rating system, without the benefit of clear packaging, saying this is for mature audiences. Our system, our voluntary system with independent rating council suggests that all fighting games receive an MA13 label and warning so that parents can decide whether that level of activity, aggressive activity in a video game should or should not be allowed into the house. Nintendo continues to suggest that their internal guidelines are appropriate and go far enough. It simply doesn't.
Go ahead and show it, and then we'll. And Senator Cole has been very patient.
According to NPD research, Street Fighter II on the Super Nintendo was their #1 game last year. You saw the Nintendo version, now the Sega version. Same level of violence in our opinion. No rating. I think the point is made.
Okay, look, Senator Cole is going to question now, but Mr. White, let me just say this to you. Today, Mr. Lincoln, on behalf of Nintendo, has accepted the idea of a rating system. They have previously been self-regulating more than you have. They chose not to produce Night Trap, and they have a clearly less violent version of Mortal Kombat out. You have a rating system, but I've still not today heard you accept responsibility for regulating the content of your games more than you already are. And I regret that. And that, I think, notwithstanding the tape you've shown us, which doesn't compare, in my opinion, to Mortal Kombat and Night Trap, is what's at issue here. Senator Cole.
Thank you, Senator Lieberman. I'd like to ask both Mr. Lincoln and Mr. White the following question. As you move and expand your business and move into the adult market and create product for the adult market only and sell it in your stores, adults come to buy it, do you have any way of guaranteeing the American people that their children aren't going to see it?
No.
Mr. White?
No, we don't, Senator. All we can do is work with the mechanisms that are available to us, and that's what we want to do through this industry-wide coalition. And that's why we're so pleased to see the VSDA here.
So that there's no way in which we can feel comfortable that the kind of material that some of us might think doesn't belong on the market at all isn't in fact going to get on the market and then be viewed by children.
Well, Senator Cole, it's similar to the motion picture industry.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I understand what you're saying.
Yes.
I just want to clarify so everybody understands where this all leads.
There's an interesting difference between Sega and Nintendo in this matter in that we have moved ahead with CD technology using a CD-ROM player as an interactive entertainment device. We have Sega CD on the market. We've had it in the market since November of 1992. Nintendo does not have a CD-ROM device. They continue to focus their marketing efforts against children. We have recognized that the interactive entertainment market is far larger than just a children's market. The demographics of our Sega CD player, which are 60% adults, suggests that that is the fact. And we would like to see a rating system that will allow us to develop games for that broad array of players, but give the consumer the information necessary to make an appropriate decision for his or her family.
All right. Do you want to say something, Mr. Lincoln?
Well, I didn't realize that the hearing was focused on market share. I thought we were talking about regulation of violence, but my colleague must think differently. Let me say this. The biggest problem we have here is in a rating system is try to figure out some way of enforcing it. And you, Senator Cole, as a former retailer, I think understand that as well as I do, being a businessman. If we simply put these ratings, this game is violent, on this packaging, however we do it, and we don't have the cooperation of retailers, if we don't have some enforcement mechanism, my own personal view is that that really may be a step backward, and we may really only be encouraging people to make more violent games. Certainly the industry is moving into different territory with new technology. Nintendo, for example, is going to be coming out with a 64-bit system in the future, but the point of that is that graphics are going to become much better, and My sense is that unless we can get everybody in this business, not just the video game companies, but the retailers and the government, involved in putting a stop to the kind of things that you're seeing in Night Trap, we're really deceiving ourselves that we're going to keep this kind of violence out of the hands of children.
Senator Cole, may I address this?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Weiner.
I'd like to state that back in September, we made a concerted effort from the VSDA to meet with all the video game manufacturers. Sega helped to implement it. We had 8 different manufacturers showed up. Nintendo declined. And at that meeting, the most important thing we did discuss was the video game rating system and how we were going to implement that system. We talked to them in quite some length about how the MPAA works. And that even if it is not 100% possible to control everything, by having a rating, it gives the parent the opportunity to make a decision if this is a good video game for my child or not. Without any rating, you have no idea really what the content is of that video game. You just know your child is coming home and saying, I want Mortal Kombat because everybody on the street has it. So we have been working with Sega since September. This is not something they just started in the past 2 weeks. They have worked with us continually for the past 2 weeks to put a coalition together, but this really was implemented back in September. We feel that the retailers, based on what we've been able to do with the MPAA system, will be very effective when we do get a good voluntary system in place.
Senator, just one comment. I'm sorry, but Ms. Weiner has failed to tell you that Nintendo does not distribute its video games to VSDA members. Sega does. So obviously, Nintendo is not the VSDA's favorite customer.
We also represent Toys R Us and Walmart, are members of the VSDA. We are not just the video rental business. We also represent the video game sales business.
All right. Mr. Johnson, what standards does the arcade industry have to prevent children's access to the kind of material that we don't want them to see?
Well, the arcades in the street, we believe, are going to have the greatest standards of anybody, and that's going to be economic.
Now, what kind of do you have any way of keeping the kids from?
Have absolutely no way of keeping the children. If it comes out in a commercial coin-op game and it goes into the arcade environment, certainly the children are going to see it. There's just no question about that.
Mm-hmm.
The impact that's happening today in the commercial coin-op market is coming from the locations themselves. Keep in mind that our members, which own the equipment, typically place it in other establishments owned by those other than themselves. Movie theaters, restaurants, bowling alleys, arcade chains, things of that nature. And we have noticed, and hence that's why we came out with our policy when we did it in October, is because in the last 60 to 90 days, we have started receiving phone calls from these locations. The movie theaters, I personally in my own business do one large amusement park who called me and said, we've got one particular game, we've had a couple parental complaints, we'd like it out. And so we are starting to see economic pressure not to have and operate these types of equipment.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the interest of moving on, let me just give you an overall impression. And I, as a person who's sitting here and listening and trying to observe, and probably also in the shoes and in the minds of all those people who are watching on TV and who'll be reading accounts of what happened in the newspaper, there's really a serious problem here. I mean, you know, this is not a dog and pony show. And sometimes I fear, and having sat through a few of these hearings, I sat through a few with the movie industry, that there is always an attempt to get by the hearing. Just get by, offer them meetings, tell them we're going to be in a week and a 2 in a month, and we're going to, don't worry about it, we're going to take care of it, we're going to self-police. I've heard this before. And it's disturbing, naturally, because you want to see progress, and there are only so much we can do here because we have constitutional responsibilities and constitutional restrictions and rights of free speech and all these things that we want to observe in this country. At the same time, none of us want to see our kids go down the tubes. None of us do. Now, you might look at something else and say, now, that's really bad. They ought to do something about it. That's kids and guns. And that's not something that you control. That's something that we try and do something about here. But you might look at it as an American parent and not involved in a business. You might say, now, they really need to do something about that. And if they can't, we have a serious problem in this country. And we're trying to do something about it. People watching here today are saying the same thing about some of the problems that we're discussing here. They need to do something about it. How are they going to do something about it? You're saying, give us till April 10th or 11th, and we'll have the problem solved, or something like that.
No, we said we have a video game conference.
I understand. We're going to regulate ourselves, give us till April 10th or 11th, and we will satisfy not the needs of Senator Dorgan, Lieberman, and Senator Cole, the needs of the American people to see this industry regulated in a, quote, proper fashion. Well, maybe we'll be around on September 10th and 11th, and we will not have taken action by then, and maybe we will. But there is a serious problem here, a real serious problem. And the fact that you find much with which to disagree with each other on this morning, I think is encouraging. I mean, you know, it indicates that you're not here in any lockstep way, that you really have some concerns about what each other are doing and are worried perhaps that you're going to, what, kill the goose that's laying the golden eggs. And you can. That could happen. And I wouldn't be surprised that in your corporate offices you are concerned about that. Because you are treading on very sensitive area here. And we will do everything we can to protect the American interest, considering our constitutional restrictions. But we will do everything we can. And I think we can do considerable. We don't want to. You know, and I'm not really suggesting, we want you to take care of your problems yourself. But I hope you walk away with one thought today, that if you don't do something about it, we will. And from where I'm sitting, if you walk away with that thought, then I'm satisfied that this hearing has had some real positive possibilities to it. Thank you very much, Senator Lieberman.
Senator Dorgan.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Let me ask Mr. Johnson, in a typical video arcade, I saw one before Thanksgiving at the mall in Minneapolis, the largest mall of America, I believe they call it. Would you find Mortal Kombat,
Yes.
Night Trap?
You wouldn't find Night Trap, no. To my knowledge, I've certainly never seen Night Trap out in a commercial
Would you find Sega's version of Mortal Kombat in that arcade?
Well, in the coin-op, Mortal Kombat is not put out by either Sega or Nintendo. It's put out by a Illinois company.
Is there any supervision in those arcades that you're aware of? I mean, the reason I ask the question is I don't see a bunch of college sophomores crowding that arcade. I saw a bunch of kids playing video games. And the question is, if you've got video arcades where kids spend hours playing video games, is there any basis for believing that some of the more violent games are out of the reach of young children? In my judgment,
No,
not.
absolutely not. And in fact, that's why if you look in the commercial coin-op side of the industry, and that's why it's so important that you understand the differentiation between the two. Night Trap, as an example, is not a coin-op piece. It is not out in coin-op. If you look through the list of the pieces that are available for the home market and the children, the vast majority of those are not out in coin-op. The one that we have spoken of today by name, of course, is Mortal Kombat. It is out in coin-op, and that is the one that where I'm telling you the market pressure has started to exert immediately. That game was released, and I already know of countless numbers of owner-operators of video games that have had to pull it from location because of location pressure that says, I won't have this for my public. I'm getting pressure from parent groups, from PTAs, get it out.
Well, that's a helpful sign to the extent that parents know what their children are playing in these arcades. All of you in the previous panel as well have talked about parental supervision. I think all of us would agree with that. Does anybody here have any notion of how many babies are born this year out of wedlock? Mr. White, do you?
No, sir, I don't.
Over 1 million. Over 1 million. 800,000 of whom will never learn the identity of their father during their lifetime. Now, if you take a look at what's happening in this country with respect to children who are growing up without supervision, without the parents that you so blithely say should supervise, I agree. There ought to be parent supervision and strong parent involvement and education and their children's viewing habits and so on. The fact is, in many cases, there aren't parents. What do you do about those kids? Do you just say, well, here we're going to lay this on the market and let the buyer beware? If some kid can get access to it, fine. I understand that when Night Trap was released, it was not rated. And I might be wrong, but I understand that the first time you rated it at the 13 level. Is that not correct?
You're wrong, Senator. I'm sorry. The rating system went into effect in June. It was rated for the first time, and it was rated MA-17, and it was produced with that label on it from that point forward.
And do you view those over the age of 13 as mature?
There's 3 designations that the Independent Rating Council chooses to designate the product. It's MA13, appropriate for teenagers and older, but not for young children with parental guidance.
But doesn't have the word
suggested.
mature attached to that?
Yes, I believe it does.
And so the presumption is those over 13 years of age are mature?
Yes.
Are you kidding me?
With parental discretion. I'm referring now to
What are you thinking about?
the
if you're
MA13
suggesting
titles.
that- Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm referring to the MA13 titles, not the MA17
I understand, but what are you thinking about if you believe that the establishment of a classification system identifies kids 13 or over as mature?
It's similar to, then the guidelines that the Independent Council uses are similar to those established by the motion picture industry on PG-13.
Well, you know, as I've indicated before, I think that all of us have great trouble with this question of censorship, and yet everybody in virtually every way understands that we have some responsibility to protect children. We don't say, well, yes, we can drink in this country, and so it's all right for everybody to drink. We decide we're going to protect our children, for example, and we're going to have certain laws that try to protect them from access to alcohol. I mean, we do that in a whole range of areas. We treat them separately in the judicial system, in the criminal justice system. We do that in a range of areas. With respect to the question of the video arcade and the video games in which a woman is grabbed by the neck with a hook and drilled in the neck with a tool, and someone grabs the heart out of a character, we ought to have just as much concern about protecting our children against that sort of trash as we have in dozens of other areas in protecting our children. And I honestly, Mr. White, I read your statement, and I honestly think that you don't understand what we're talking about here. Let me tell you why. In your final point about Night Trap, you say this: finally, there is some research suggesting a short-term, momentary increase in playful, aggressive behavior after playing video games or watching violent television programs. There is no research concluding that this has any lasting impact. In fact, quite the opposite is true, you say. My sense is that you really don't get what this hearing is about, and I don't mean to single you out. It's likely there are others that ought to be sitting in your place. But you know, we, it seems to me, have to begin to exercise some common sense to protect our children. And when you say, and when others say, and my guess is the person that marketed this particular game says, this is not for kids, this is adult entertainment. The fact is, you know and I know that kids in this country will have wide access to it. And we need to exercise responsibility to see that we protect those children. And frankly, prior to this hearing, I've seen very little effort on the part of people in the industry to do that. The effort has been to try to follow the money tracks and see how you can profit. Unfortunately, profiting at the expense of America's kids is not moral profit in my judgment. And my hope is this hearing provides a direction that is much more constructive for this country and for our kids. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Dorgan. Thank you very much. I look forward to continue to work with you. I have some more questions. Mr. White, in the rating system that Sega has, beyond the MA17, MA13, and the rest, you have a category non-approval.
Yes, sir.
So that that's indication on the guidelines themselves that Sega has established that you profess an intention to exercise some self-control here. And I read from the latest version of the guidelines, which is December 2nd of 1993. As always, Sega will not approve products which contain A1, material that encourages criminality of any kind. Isn't making a game and selling it that encourages a kid to point a gun at a television set and rewards his success or her success by increasing the firepower of the gun, encouraging criminality? I mean, we're all aware of this incredible outbreak of gun violence in our country. Is it responsible? Let me put it another way. Is it within the terms of the guidelines that you've established to make a game that puts this in the hand of a child and rewards his skill at shooting at the television screen and the characters in it, including, as Senator Cole said innocent bystanders who, when hit, are pumped back and bleed.
Senator, we rely on the Independent Rating Council to help us make those decisions because we at corporate are not psychologists, we're not sociologists, we do not understand the detail of that research that was discussed at the first panel. We rely on experts to help make those decisions. And they have rated that product MA-17, only appropriate for adults. I may also point out that Sega produces product for a rapid-fire machine gun that uses the same technology, to our understanding, with several games available, and they have no rating on that product to suggest that product's for adults.
Nintendo produces that, you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a similar device. It's a bazooka rather than a handgun.
And what is the game is that for a video game? Mr. Lincoln, do you want to?
This is a thing that comes with the, or can be purchased with the Super NES. It obviously doesn't quite look like what you've got in your hands. It's called the Super Scope. The gun that you have in your hand is called the Justifier. I think that this game is a target shoot. This device is for target shooting and whatnot. You know, I guess I'd rest my case with the fact that we're not putting the name Justifier on it. And the game that you're speaking of, Lethal Enforcer, let me tell you that that game was initially rejected by Nintendo. We told the licensee that we would not allow that game on the market.
Right.
We told him that he would told it that they would have to take off the word Justifier, and we made a number of substantial changes to it. And we also told him we wouldn't approve this kind of packaging. The end result is that that product is not yet out on the Nintendo platform.
I hope before it goes out on the market, you'll think again about it, because it's more than the name Justifier on this. This is a handgun, pure and simple. And no matter what the name is on it, putting it in the hands of a kid just gives them the wrong idea. As I must say, to me that looks like a weapon and not like a high-tech implement of any kind. It looks like an assault weapon of some kind. Let me go to another part of this problem, and that is the chain of distribution, the chain of advertising. Because if you establish a rating system, it's got to be carried out throughout the chain. As you indicated earlier, I went into, one of my staff members this morning went into a Toys R Us on the way to work, and Night Trap is right there alongside the other video games that the kids can buy. I want to show you two examples that deal with advertising. The first is this Toys R Us circular, and if you can see it, I think you'll see, Mr. White, in that case, that the ratings on Mortal Kombat are not visible. They've been covered over. Now, I know that's not your ad. You don't own Toys R Us, but I'm just trying to make the point of how important it is if you're really going to rely on your rating system, yes, to follow that through the chain. Second, we've got this ad for Lethal Enforcer that Senator Cole has pointed to before, and the rating, which is on your package, is effectively, it's not visible. The carton is raised in such a way that it's covered it up. And of course, apart from that, and you'd have to look for it, I mean, one other exercise of responsibility here would have been simply to have had a mark somewhere else there saying, this is MA-17, this shouldn't be bought or used by anyone under the age of 17. So my question is this. Pursuant to your commitment to have a rating system, would you commit now to do everything in your power to ensure that the ratings are not only visible on your product, but visible in advertising for your product, especially advertising, of course, which you procure directly? Mr. White and Mr.
Yes,
Lincoln.
Chairman Lieberman, I refer to my written testimony that we are, in fact, suggesting that consistency as to the presentation of ratings and product packaging, advertising, and promotional materials. And I'll go beyond that and suggest that it should be prominent. And you have our commitment. I don't believe that that same commitment has been made by Nintendo. It is in our testimony.
Mr. Lincoln?
Well, I don't know what he's talking about there. As you well know, we have made a commitment to the rating system. The point that I've been making all along, and the point that I made to both of you this morning individually, was that we are concerned that a rating system by itself might just be an open season on more violent games. The commitment that I'll make to you is that we will, while we will participate in formulating a rating system, we'll be the first ones back here if what we see is nothing more than just business as usual. If we're going to have a rating system, let's put some meat in it. Let's figure out a way to get the retailers to enforce it. Let's figure out a way that, that the consumer can clearly understand the content of these games, and we'll certainly make that commitment. I've made that to you prior to the hearing in my statement, and I'll repeat it now.
Thank you. Ms. Rosenthal, on behalf of the Software Publishers Association, am I correct that Konami would be a member of the association?
Excuse me, Your Honor. I'm sorry, Mr. Senator.
It's okay.
I do not believe that company is a member.
Would you consider it a software publisher, whether it's a member or not?
I'm truthfully not familiar with that
let me,
company.
notwithstanding that, let me just get to ask you whether, on behalf of your association, you would commit here as part of the implementation of a rating system to do everything within your power to prominently display the ratings in advertising your members may procure and promotional materials that you put out.
Absolutely. Senator Lieberman, you've made some very, very cogent points here. And what I want to emphasize today is the sincerity of the industry. They have heard what you and Senator Cole have had to say, and they are sincerely interested in the well-being of children. And any system, rating system that does get adopted will be consistent and will be understandable and will be labeled in a similar manner and will be enforceable. That's a commitment that we can make to you.
Okay, Ms. Weiner, in terms of the video rental stores as we know them, right now it's clear that if you go into a store, most of the stores, certainly the big Blockbuster for instance, if you're under 17, as you said, your age is basically checked, and you can't take out an R-rated unless you got parental permission, and you can't take NC-17 under any circumstances. On the other hand, and I know there hasn't, I guess, been a widely accepted system. One of the staff went into Blockbuster, one of the Blockbusters around here last week, took out Mortal Kombat, and it had no rating on it, and it appeared that it would be easy for a child to take it out as well. I just wanted to ask whether it would be the intention of your members, once a rating system is adopted by the industry, to implement it in the same way you have the movie rating system.
Absolutely. We plan to implement the pledge to parents again to add the video games to this system. And that's back to our conference. That's where we're really going to spin off the whole educational process, that now there is a rating system in effect. We want you to add that to the pledge to parents. We want you to have your members and explain to your membership about the new system. And basically what most of us do is, in our computers, we have the parents sign. If they do have children, what are the ages of their children, and in fact, will they allow them to rent any video games? And so we have all intentions of implementing the system to the best of our ability.
Mr. Johnson, you probably got the hardest job of all in your arcades and other facilities, but what if there is a rating system on the video games? Are your members in a position to start to try to exercise some influence on what, for instance, if a 10-year-old goes up and starts to play Mortal Kombat or Night Trap, can you do anything to stop him from doing that?
Again, one more time, first of all, Night Trap isn't out in coin-op, and right. So that's not an issue. A Mortal Kombat, in answer to that question, absolutely no way. The coin-op is spread literally every small town in the United States. The vast majority of locations, while you're familiar and focusing on the major game rooms, that room that is housed and has an attendant, remember that there are movie theaters and grocery stores and restaurants, nightclubs, and virtually every type of location, retail outlet you can think of that today houses video games. And in most of those cases, they are not in immediate supervision. And under those scenarios, as an example, if you were to rate Mortal Kombat and say it is absolutely not to be played by anyone under the age of 17, in the commercial arena, we have no way of enforcing that, short of simply not placing the game.
And in some cases, you're doing that in response, your members are doing it in response to
And that's what we're saying.
parental
From the
pressure.
coin-op side, the market pressure is causing that. Let's face it, we can sit here all day and talk about morals, but the reality of the business world out there, and unfortunately in many cases, is driven by economics.
Okay.
And economically, our people are being forced to pull them.
Final question for Mr. White and the panel. In your guidelines, you say that you're not going to approve products which contain material that denigrates any ethnic, racial, sexual, or religious group. Obviously, I think that Night Trap denigrates a sexual group, namely women, and we've talked about that. But in this, again, this is not your ad. In the Konami ad, there's a reference to ninjas. It talks about fighting ninjas in Chinatown, aside from being, as I understand it, culturally inaccurate, since ninjas are in the origin Japanese and not Chinese. Do you agree that that's in violation of the spirit of your own guidelines?
And, Senator, those guidelines refer to the games, not to the advertising. We don't currently extend.
No, I understand that.
That's not our advertisement.
So would you say that if your advertisers at Sega asked you about including that kind of phrase in a Sega ad, that you'd tell them not to do it?
I'm sorry, I don't know which phrase you're referring to.
Well, there's a reference there to fighting ninjas in Chinatown. To me, it seems like an minimum ethnically insensitive, and maybe
We'd strongly discourage that kind of language. Absolutely.
Okay. Senator Cole and I are very serious about this and intend to stay with it. And I must say that I think we're going to pursue our legislation. I hope that you're able, within the industry, to come up with a rating system that meets everyone's concerns. But I think the best guarantee of that is for us to stick with the course we've set. And as part of that, we are going to convene again here, preferably in February, to meet again with you and see what progress you've made up until that time in your rating system. And then we can decide where to go from there. And again, I know there's a tremendous market incentive here. The money's got to be very attractive, but the best thing you can do, not only for this country, but for yourselves, is to self-regulate. And believe me, it's not only going to be important to our kids, it's going to be important to the ultimate credibility and success of your business. And frankly, in some measure, it's going to be important to the maintenance of constitutional freedoms in our country, because unless people self-regulate, unless people draw some lines, the sense that too many people in our country have that we're out of control is going to lead to genuine threats to our freedom, which nobody wants to see. So we've come some ways. I appreciate the ways we've come, but we've got a ways to go yet. And I hope that you will become the leaders in this. Senator Cole and I have a lot of other things we can work on here in the Senate. I hope that you'll take it from here and work it in a way that we don't have to worry about it anymore. Senator Cole?
Yes, thank you. Just a final word, consistent with what Senator Lieberman just said. You know, there is, in America, an awful lot of freedom, and we cherish it, we want it, we deserve it, and we're not going to let it go. And neither is the commercial world, nor should you. But there is that tendency, at least I see it here this morning, but it's not unique, I think, to this particular industry. As you know, there's always that tendency to use the system down to the last inch to maximize profit and stock price and so on. It's human. I mean, I'm not suggesting these are bad people. But that's what happens in our country, because it's so free, and everybody has an opportunity to do almost whatever they want with its certain limitations. And I think this is an example of how we can push it too far and really do great damage to our country. You see it in other things, not related to your own business, but I think those of us who are here today see it in this business, and we hope very much that you step back and take into account our common responsibilities as citizens here, and not only as people who are employed to maximize profits. Thank you.
Hearing is adjourned. Thank you all.
Good job, Joe.
Good job, Herb. Good to work on this.
Senators Joseph Lieberman and Herbert Kohl are co-sponsoring a bill that would require video game manufacturers to label their products to reveal their violence and sexual content. Under the bill, if manufacturers can't come up with a uniform set of standards in 1 year, the president would then appoint a 5-member council to do it for them. In a moment, an update of the program schedule, but first we follow the trail of the C-SPAN school bus. Cablevision Industries hosted a stop of the